Good evening, and welcome to the Sleep to Lore series. Tonight, we will talk about Dreamcatcher, a chilling story set in the deep, snowy woods of Maine, where a hunting trip turns into a fight for survival against a threat from the stars. If you would like, subscribe or comment to help the channel grow. As a new channel, every member who joins is helping to build this library of lore from the ground up. If you want to support these deep dives, click the join button below. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Have you ever gone back to a place you loved as a child only to find it felt scary or wrong as an adult? Comment your thoughts below. Now let us step into the cold and uncover the mystery. It began with a motto, a profane mantra that bound them together through the years. SSDD, same shit, different day. Jonesy couldn't recall the origin, though he knew the crude variations belonged to Beaver, and the philosophical underpinnings, the what goes around comes around of it all, belonged to Henry. But the acronym itself was a collective invention, a shield against the world. It was a creed they adhered to when they were 4, then 5, and then 4 again. But when the circle shrank back to the original quartet, the days grew darker. They were different men, touched by something they couldn't quite articulate, caught in a web woven long before the lights appeared in the sky. To survive the encroaching shadows, one sometimes has to believe in nothing but the darkness itself. We drift back to 1988. The year is a bruise on the timeline of Joe Beaver Clarendon. His marriage has disintegrated with the catastrophic finality of a shuttle explosion. Beaver, typically the purveyor of good times and crude jokes, is spiraling. He haunts the bars of Portland, drowning in draft beer and the thick smoke of cheap marijuana, avoiding his reflection in the bathroom mirror because he knows the red-rimmed eyes staring back belong to a man losing his grip. He fears he's becoming like Pete, sliding into the bottle. One Thursday finds him in the Free Street pub, surrounded by the stale comfort of oldies music, songs from a simpler time that he clings to, unlike the modern tracks his ex-wife enjoyed. He sits with drinking buddies, men who are merely placeholders in his life, listening to George Pelson brag about a conquest. George spins a tale about meeting a singer named Chantay behind the Civic Center, pointing to a mark on his neck as proof of passion. But Beaver, staring into the smoky haze, knows it's a lie. He doesn't just suspect it. He perceives the truth with a terrifying clarity that is the hallmark of his curse. He knows the mark is a razor burn. He knows the girl blew past George without a glance. This insight is not a gift. It is an intrusion. Suddenly, the ambient noise of the bar is pierced by the sound of crying inside Beaver's mind. It is a long-gone, jagged sobbing that feels like glass splinters in his brain. It is the sound of the fifth friend, the one they saved, the one Beaver sang to. Overwhelmed by this psychic echo and the crushing weight of his own depression, Beaver flees the bar. He needs the cold, salt-heavy air of the harbor. He needs to ground himself. He finds a payphone and calls Henry. He doesn't need a conversation, he needs the code. When Henry answers, Beaver asks how he is, and Henry replies with the only words that matter. Same shit, different day. The connection holds. The darkness recedes, just for a moment. Move forward to 1993. Pete Moore sits in a car dealership in Bridgeton, twirling a keychain emblazoned with the NASA logo. Dreams have a way of dying loudly in the back of one's mind, and Pete's dream was always the stars. He remains obsessed with the purity of space, the silence of the moon, a stark contrast to his reality of selling Fords in the rain. He is a functioning alcoholic, waiting for the clock to strike 5 so he can justify his first beer, waiting for November so he can hunt with his friends and drink without judgment. On a rainy afternoon, a distressed woman enters the showroom. She has lost her keys and is on the verge of missing a career-making appointment. Pete, ever the charmer, steps up. But as she speaks, describing her panic, Pete feels that familiar, dangerous click. It is the line. the supernatural thread that connects the four friends to their past and to each other. He sees the woman's movements in his mind's eye with impossible precision. He sees the candy she bought, the aspirin, the exact moment the keys slipped from her grasp into the gutter. He decides to help her, hoping for a dinner date, a human connection to stave off the loneliness. He leads her out into the rain and performs a parlor trick that is anything but magic. He narrates her actions back to her, walks to the gutter, and produces the keys. But instead of gratitude, he sees fear. The woman looks at him not as a savior, but as something unnatural. She takes the keys and flees, leaving Pete standing alone in the rain. The gift has once again alienated him from the normal world. He retreats to a bar, resigned to the sadness that feels like a penalty for a crime he can't quite remember. He calls Jonesy's house, leaving the message SSDD with the babysitter. It is an acknowledgement that while they grew up, the dream machine is broken. By 1998, the darkness has found a comfortable home in Henry Devlin's office. Henry, a psychiatrist, prefers the dim light, which he believes matches the dim minds of his patients. He's sliding into a profound depression, shedding his appetite and his sleep, finding a perverse solace in the gloom. He is treating Barry Newman, a morbidly obese man whose life is a relentless cycle of consumption. Henry usually maintains a professional distance, but the filter is thinning. Barry drones on about his gluttony, recounting every calorie with almost sensual delight, completely ignoring the root of his psychosis. Henry, his mind drifting to the upcoming hunting trip with the boys, the one bright spot in his year, suddenly snaps. The line opens. He doesn't just analyze Barry, he flays him. Henry speaks the unspeakable truth, revealing that he knows Barry let his mother die. He knows Barry sat eating while his mother screamed for help, calling for an ambulance as her heart gave out. Henry's voice is calm, but his words are lethal. He strips away Barry's defenses, predicting his eventual humiliating death. Barry, terrified by this impossible knowledge, flees the office. Henry is left alone, realizing he has violated every ethical code, but feeling the grim satisfaction of the truth. He lies on his couch in the dark, speaking to the voice in his head, acknowledging that the darkness is coming. The hunting trips are nearing their end. The real horror is approaching. Finally, we arrive in March 2001. Jonesy is in his office at the college, looking out at the deceptive spring sunlight. He is unaware that this day will end in blood and sirens. The phone rings. It is Henry. Jonesy senses the heaviness in his friend's voice immediately. Henry reports that Barry Newman is dead, a heart attack at 29, a victim of the truth Henry forced upon him years ago. But Henry isn't calling just to share news of a death. He is calling with a premonition. The psychic bond is vibrating with warning. He tells Jonesy to be careful. Jonesy brushes off the warning, distracted by a student, David Defuniak, waiting in the doorway. Defuniak is there because he cheated, and Jonesy knows. He didn't see the student cheat, nor did he have proof, but the flash had told him. The boy's guilt was a neon sign in Jonesy's mind. Yet in a moment of grace that contrasts sharply with Henry's cruelty to Barry, Jonesy offers the boy a second chance. He assigns a make-up essay, showing mercy where he could have shown judgment. After the student leaves, Jonesy feels the urge to go out into the sunlight. He marks his calendar for a trip to Derry to see their old friend Douglas, Duddits, at Henry's insistence. As he grabs his briefcase, a voice speaks from his own throat, sudden and alien. "Watch out for Mr. Gray." Jonesy pauses, puzzled by the auditory hallucination, but dismisses it. He steps out of the office, pinning a note to his door that he will return at 1. He will not return. He steps into the March air, thinking of egg salad sandwiches and the promise of spring, blind to the catastrophe rushing to meet him. The days of the quartet are numbered, and the line is about to pull them into a nightmare that has been waiting since childhood. Chapter 1. The woods of Maine have a way of hiding things, but they also have a way of revealing the cracks in a man's psyche. We begin with Jonesy, perched high in a tree stand, a vantage point that offers both physical elevation and a terrifying look into his own fractured mind. It is November, the season of cold iron and falling leaves, and Jonesy is hunting, or at least he is pretending to. There is a psychological phenomenon known as eye fever. It is a trick of the desperate brain, a hallucination born of anxiety, where the hunter wants to see the prey so badly that he projects a deer onto the landscape where none exists. Jonesy, holding his Garan rifle, falls victim to this visual lie. He sees the buck. He sees the heavy rack of antlers, the dark velvet of the animal's eye. His finger tightens on the trigger. He is mere ounces of pressure away from ending a life. But Jonesy is not the man he used to be. Earlier that year, in March, he was struck by a car in Cambridge. It was a violent, shattering event that left him with a replaced hip and a haunting duality of consciousness. There is the Jonesy from before the accident, confident, whole, and the Jonesy that came after. The survivor. This second Jonesy, the one born in a hospital bed amidst a haze of pain and morphine, is cautious. It is this second, broken version of himself that whispers for him to wait. And because he waits, he does not commit murder. The illusion of the deer dissolves into a terrifying reality. The brown flank of the animal becomes a brown coat. The antlers become the branches of the maple tree. The orange tag becomes a hat. It is a man. A stranger stumbling through the snow, oblivious to the fact that he nearly died at the hands of a university professor fighting the ghosts of his own trauma. Jonesy lowers the weapon, shaken to his core. The man below collapses, getting up only to stagger like a drunkard. But he isn't drunk. As Jonesy descends from the tree to intercept him, he realizes the stranger is possessed by a primal, infantile fear. The man is weeping, muttering about being lost. His behavior regressed to that of a frightened child. He uses words like askert, a linguistic slip that signals a mind retreating from a reality too terrible to process. This is our introduction to Richard McCarthy. When Jonesy reaches him, the first thing he notices is the man's pallor. He looks scooped out, empty, light as a husk. But there is something else, a sensory detail that Stephen King uses to signal biological wrongness. The smell. McCarthy's breath carries a distinct chemical odor. It smells of ether and overripe bananas. It is the scent of something artificial and something rotting, mingling together. McCarthy clings to Jonesy with desperate gratitude. He speaks of being lost since the previous day, of a night spent in terror of the elements and unseen beasts. He claims to have seen lightning, dry lightning, which is an impossibility in these winter woods, suggesting hallucinations or a phenomenon far outside the natural order. Jonesy guides the stranger toward the sanctuary of the cabin, hole in the wall. It is a place of history for Jonesy and his friends, Henry, Pete, and the Beaver. They have been coming here for decades, a brotherhood cemented in childhood. But as they cross the threshold, bringing this foreign element into their sanctuary, the atmosphere shifts. The cabin, usually a place of warmth and nostalgia, is about to become a containment zone. Inside, the physical wrongness of McCarthy becomes more apparent. As he unzips his coat, he struggles with the mechanism, his motor skills failing him. He stands there, helpless, allowing Jonesy to undress him like a parent tending to a toddler. It is here that we see the Dreamcatcher hanging from the rafters, a woven web meant to snare nightmares. It is a potent symbol, for a living nightmare has just walked through the front door. Jonesy notices a red mark on McCarthy's cheek. It looks like frostbite, or perhaps a birthmark, but it glows with an angry heat. And then there are the teeth. When McCarthy smiles, Jonesy feels a cold spike of revulsion. The man is missing 4 front teeth, 2 top, 2 bottom. The horror isn't just the gap. It's that McCarthy seems completely unaware of it. A man, especially a lawyer as McCarthy claims to be, would know if his face was falling apart. But he doesn't. He is disintegrating, and his mind is editing out the decay. Chapter 2. The cabin at Hole in the Wall is a fortress against the encroaching storm, but the true threat is already inside. The domesticity of the scene, Jonesy making grilled cheese and heating soup, contrasts sharply with the biological horror unfolding on the couch. Beaver arrives, stomping in from the snow. The Beaver is the heart of the group, a man defined by his crude, joyous profanity and his unshakable loyalty. He brings a burst of energy into the room, his Beavisms, nonsensical curse words, cutting through the tension. He immediately accepts the stranger McCarthy with open arms. This is the tragedy of the Beaver. His kindness is a vulnerability. He offers camaraderie to a vessel of infection. The two friends try to feed McCarthy, but the man can barely eat. He speaks of his ordeal in the woods, his story fragmented and confusing, and then the body horror escalates. McCarthy emits flatulence of impossible volume and duration. It is not merely a social faux pas, it is a mechanical tearing sound like a chainsaw engaging. The smell that fills the room is not the smell of digestion. It is that same chemical stench, ether and spoiling fruit, amplified to a choking degree. It is the smell of a body whose internal chemistry has been fundamentally altered. The Beav, usually the first to make a joke, is silenced by the sheer alien nature of the odor. It triggers a primal repulsion in both men. McCarthy is mortified, behaving again like a shamed child. He hunches over, sweating profusely, beads of perspiration running down his face like oil. He belches, a long buzzing sound that vibrates with the same machine-like quality. He claims it is just a stomachache from eating wild berries and moss, but the biological evidence suggests his insides are churning with something far more volatile. Jonesy and Beaver decide to put McCarthy to bed in the downstairs room. As McCarthy undresses, stripping down to his thermal underwear, he seems to drift away. His eyes go glassy, resembling the eyes of a mounted deerhead, a callback to Jonesy's earlier hallucination in the woods. The man is becoming an object, a shell. Left alone in the kitchen, Jonesy and Beaver try to make sense of the intruder. This is where the detective work begins, and the supernatural reality starts to bleed through the mundane explanations. They retreat to the far side of the room, whispering, terrified of being overheard by the thing in the bedroom. They compare notes. The Beav, observant despite his chaotic demeanor, points out the temporal discrepancies. McCarthy thinks it is Sunday. He believes he has been lost for one night. But today is Wednesday. The man has missing time, days of it. If he had truly been wandering the Maine woods for 4 nights in November, he should be dead from hypothermia. Yet he has no severe frostbite, only that angry red patch on his cheek. Furthermore, there is the matter of his beard. A man lost for 4 days should have significant growth. McCarthy has only a day's worth of stubble. It is as if he was paused, as if he was taken out of time and placed back in the woods, or as if his biology has been suspended. The humor of the situation, the giant farts, the absurdity of it, quickly drains away, leaving only dread. They realize that McCarthy is an unreliable narrator of his own existence. He is a lawyer who doesn't know he's missing teeth. He is a man who thinks he's been gone 1 night when he's been gone 4. He is a biological radiator of ether gas. Outside, the weather turns vicious. The snow is no longer a gentle dusting. It is a whiteout, a wall of isolation sealing them in. Jonesy and Beaver look out the window, their thoughts turning to their other 2 friends, Henry and Pete, who are still out in the storm on a supply run. The anxiety is twofold now, the external threat of the blizzard and the internal threat of the sick man in the bedroom. Beaver, usually the optimist, looks at Jonesy with a grim realization. He notes that Henry is a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, and they desperately need a doctor. Because whatever is happening to McCarthy is not a stomach flu. It is an invasion. The chapter closes with the wind howling, the trap snapping shut, and the realization that the old friends are alone in the deep woods with something that looks like a man, but smells like death and decay. Chapter 3. The narrative shifts to Henry Devlin, piloting the scout through the blinding, relentless snow of the deep-cut road. While the vehicle battles the physical storm, Henry battles a much quieter, deadlier tempest within his own mind. We are privy here to the terrifying internal landscape of a man who has decided to die, but hasn't yet decided how. He contemplates what he calls the Hemingway solution, a grim intellectualization of suicide involving a shotgun. It is a stark look at the duality of Henry's existence. He is a psychiatrist, a healer of minds, yet he meticulously plans his own destruction with a clinical, almost detached precision. He considers other methods: drowning, exhaust fumes, pills, treating his own life as a problem to be solved, a variable to be removed from the equation. However, he possesses a distinct sense of propriety. He decides he cannot do it here at Hole in the Wall. To end his life in the sanctuary of their childhood friendship would be an act of pollution. It would stain the memories of Jonesy, Pete, and Beaver. This reveals the core of Henry's character. Even in his deepest despair, his loyalty to the circle remains the governing law of his life. Beside him, Pete is oblivious, drinking beer and complaining about the speed. Henry navigates the conversation with a practiced ease, wearing the mask of the functional, reliable friend. This is the tragedy of the high-functioning depressive. Henry simulates normalcy so perfectly that his friends cannot see the precipice he is standing on. They discuss the rumors they heard at Goslin's market. Lights in the sky, missing hunters, military maneuvers. Henry dismisses it all as hysteria, using his professional authority to rationalize the irrational. He is the skeptic, the man of science, unaware that he is driving directly into an event that defies all logic. The atmosphere shifts abruptly from psychological tension to visceral shock. At the crest of a ridge, the headlights reveal a figure sitting cross-legged in the dead center of the snowy road. It is a woman. She is motionless, catatonic, staring blindly into the storm. The image is jarring because it violates the survival instinct. Nothing sits still in a blizzard unless it is broken. Henry swerves. The scout loses its grip on the ruts, transforming from a controlled machine into a chaotic projectile. King masterfully slows down time here, allowing us to see the mechanics of the crash, the spin, the loss of control, and the miraculous fact that they miss the woman by inches. The vehicle rolls, shattering the world into noise and darkness. In the aftermath, amidst the wreckage and the cold, Henry's first instinct is not self-preservation but assessment. He and Pete are battered, bruised and bleeding, but alive. The woman, however, remains seated in the road, untouched by the violence that just unfolded around her. When Henry approaches her, we encounter the first tangible signs of the biological horror that permeates this story. This is not a damsel in distress. She is a vessel of sickness. She is heavy-set, dressed in hunting orange, but her eyes are void of comprehension. When she speaks, asking for someone named Rick, her voice is lost to the wind, but it is the smell that registers most alarmingly. She emits a belch that smells of raw ether and organic decay, a scent of wrongness. It isn't merely bad hygiene, it is the olfactory signal of internal corruption. She passes gas with a sound like ripping cloth, and the odor is metallic, chemical. It suggests that her insides are becoming something other than human. Then, the cosmic horror intrudes. As Henry and Pete try to manage this catatonic survivor, lights appear in the sky. These are not searchlights, they are distinct, maneuvering orbs dancing in the clouds. The woman's reaction is immediate and primal. She screams, "They're back!" before collapsing against the tire of the wrecked scout. Her terror punctures the confusion. She knows what these lights are, and that knowledge has shattered her mind. Henry, ever the rationalist, tries to categorize the lights as an electrical storm phenomenon, desperate to maintain order in a world rapidly going mad. But the reality of their situation is purely survival. The vehicle is dead. The temperature is dropping. They must move. They begin a painful trek to a nearby logger's shelter. This journey highlights the physical fragility of the group. Pete's knee, an old football injury, is locking up, a physical echo of the past, just as Henry's suicidal ideation is a mental echo. They drag the woman on a found tarp, a grim procession through the snow. During this struggle, the narrative weaves in the touchstone of their shared past, Duddits. Pete mentions him, and Henry responds with the mantra, "No bounce, no play." It is a reminder of their childhood friend who bound them together. Henry reflects on how Duddits defined them, how their defense of him was their finest hour. This nostalgia serves as a shield against the encroaching darkness. In Stephen King's universe, childhood innocence is often the only weapon against adult corruption. They reach the shelter and manage to light a fire, huddling against the cold, unaware that the true heat is coming from the infection spreading within the woman they have just saved. Chapter 4. The perspective shifts back to the cabin, hole in the wall, where Jonesy and Beaver are engaged in the ritual of cribbage. The game acts as a grounding mechanism, a repetitive, structured activity that holds the chaos at bay. But the atmosphere in the cabin is curdling. The source of the tension lies behind the closed bedroom door, where the stranger, Rick McCarthy, was left to rest. The air in the cabin is growing foul, tainted by the same ether-like metallic stench Henry encountered on the road. It is the smell of a body turning into a chemical factory. Jonesy and Beaver are trying to ignore it, trying to stay within the safe confines of their game, but the environment outside the cabin begins to warp. Beaver calls Jonesy to the window to witness a mass migration. The forest is emptying. Deer, raccoons, squirrels, and predators are moving together in a singular panicked exodus. They are not running from fire. They are fleeing a presence. King uses the natural world as a barometer for evil. When the animals break their natural hierarchies to flee in unison, it signifies a threat that endangers all biology. Above this exodus, Jonesy and Beaver see the same lights Henry saw, silent, maneuvering, unnatural. The dread compounds when Beaver realizes the bedroom door is open, but the bathroom door is shut. A trail of bright red blood dots the floor between the two rooms. The trail is a stark visual cue that the situation has escalated from sickness to hemorrhage. They investigate the bedroom first. The psychological horror here is in the intimacy of the violation. The bed where McCarthy lay is soaked in blood, a purple blotch on the sheet. His discarded underwear is matted with it. It looks less like a medical emergency and more like a birthing scene or a slaughter. The sheer volume of blood suggests that McCarthy shouldn't be walking, let alone locking himself in a bathroom. Jonesy and Beaver stand before the bathroom door, paralyzed by indecision. This is the threshold. Behind it lies the truth of the infection. They hear McCarthy inside, but the sounds are not human. He groans, not just in pain, but in confusion. He speaks of needing to move his bowels, but the sounds that follow are wet, tearing explosions. The flatulence is thunderous and smells of methane and decay. It is a grotesque parody of bodily function. McCarthy believes he is merely sick, perhaps suffering from food poisoning, but the listeners know better. The disconnect between McCarthy's polite, embarrassed apologies and the violent, ripping sounds of his body betraying him creates a sickening dissonance. Suddenly, the isolation of the cabin is broken by the heavy thrum of a helicopter. A massive Air National Guard transport descends, hovering over the yard. Beaver rushes out, desperate for salvation, flagging it down. But the interaction is dystopian. The figure leaning out of the helicopter is faceless, masked in breathing apparatus, speaking through a bullhorn. The message is not one of rescue, but of containment. Quarantine. The word hangs in the snowy air. The pilot warns them to stay put, promising resolution in 24 to 48 hours. Beaver screams that they have a hurt man, that they need help, but the machine rises and departs. This is a pivotal moment of realization. They are not just lost, they are imprisoned. The authorities know what is happening, and they have written off the inhabitants of the Jefferson Tract. The mask on the pilot's face confirms that the very air around them is considered poison. Left alone again, the silence of the woods returns, heavier than before. The hope of rescue is replaced by the certainty of entrapment. Jonesy and Beaver turn their attention back to the bathroom door. McCarthy's pleas have turned to screams, and the smell is becoming unbearable. The social contract, the politeness that kept them from barging in on a man using the toilet, has been obliterated by the stench of death. Jonesy and Beaver realize they can no longer wait. The horror is not just outside in the lights and the snow, it is locked in the room with them. They decide to break down the door. They put their shoulders to the wood, counting down. It is an act of invasion, but also a desperate attempt to confront the unknown. As the wood splinters and gives way, they stumble into the small room, their boots slipping on tiles slick with blood. The sight that awaits them is hidden for a moment longer, but the reaction is immediate. Beaver, the man who uses humor and profanity as a shield, is reduced to silence, his hand covering his mouth, his eyes wide with a terror that transcends language. They have breached the sanctuary, and what they have found will change them forever. Chapter 5. The narrative shifts now to Pete. Left alone in the freezing indifference of the Maine woods, a man trapped between a rock and a hard place, or more accurately, between a dying fire and a woman who is no longer entirely human. The isolation here is absolute. Pete sits by the woman in the duffel coat, staring into the crackling heat he and Henry had managed to scavenge, but the warmth does little to thaw the icy dread settling in his gut. The woman is an enigma of biological wrongness. She lies on the sawdust-covered tarp, silent save for the occasional yawn that reveals a ruin of missing teeth and that one open eye. Pete calls it a jackalope eye. It stares at him, or perhaps through him, fixed on some cosmic joke only she understands. It creates a psychological pressure cooker for Pete. He tries to engage her, calling out "lady" into the void, but the only response he gets is a series of inhuman, mechanical gastrointestinal sounds, burps and farts that smell not of digestion, but of something volatile. King often uses smell to anchor the supernatural in the physical, and here the scent is specific. It's not the marshy organic smell of livestock, but the sharp, chemical reek of a child's chemistry set gone wrong. It smells like something meant to explode. This sensory detail triggers a primal flight response in Pete, a deep-seated anxiety that the human vessel before him is becoming a biological bomb. But Pete has another demon to contend with: addiction. The internal logic of the alcoholic takes over. Henry has been gone only 15 minutes, yet to Pete it feels like an eternity. He calculates the time, 3 hours minimum for Henry's return, and the prospect of facing those 3 hours sober, under the gaze of that terrifying eye, is impossible. He convinces himself he needs to return to the overturned Scout. He fabricates a rationale. He forgot something. He even bargains with the silent woman, offering to bring her crackers, interpreting her silence as consent. It's a classic addict's maneuver, projecting permission onto the world to justify the fix. He leaves her. He abandons the helpless, gas-filled woman to the encroaching winter, and begins the painful trek back to the crash site. His knee is a wreck, a stiff, locking mechanism of pain, but the promise of beer, the happy poison, propels him forward. As he limps back along the deep-cut road, reality begins to warp. Pete witnesses an exodus. Nature is in retreat. A large buck passes him, followed by a red squirrel, ignoring the predator-prey dynamic in favor of blind flight. They are refugees. a snowshoe rabbit, a black bear fat for hibernation. They all stream east, ignoring Pete entirely. This indifference is more chilling than aggression. It strips Pete of his illusions of dominance. He realizes he is merely meat, spared only because the bear is fleeing something worse. The psychological weight of his abandonment of the woman hits him, but he suppresses it with the promise of the reward. He reaches the Scout, which now resembles a snowy tomb. Crawling inside is an exercise in claustrophobia. The vehicle smells of Henry's cologne, a scent Pete's mind strangely associates with funerals and coffins and the spilled beer. He ignores the food scattered about, the survival essentials, and goes straight for the alcohol. He cuts his hand on broken glass, a blood sacrifice for his prize, and salvages the remaining bottles. Sitting in the snow, drinking that first cold beer, the pain recedes and his mind drifts. Alcohol opens the door to nostalgia, the drunk's favorite pastime. He finds himself thinking of Duddits, Douglas Cavell, the glue that held their quartet together. He thinks about how they met, a memory that stands in stark contrast to the grim, grey reality of the present. He remembers the innocence of 1978, a time before the alien infection, before the cancers and the accidents. We enter the memory with him. It is 1978, Derry, Maine. The four friends, Henry, Jonesy, Beaver, and Pete, are in junior high. The hierarchy is established. Henry and Jonesy are the smart ones, Beaver is the wild card, and Pete is the follower, struggling with the X in math equations. They are suspended in that amber of adolescence where same shit, different day is the motto, and the future is a vague concept involving astronauts and lawyers. They are walking past the Mary M. Snow School for the Exceptional, known cruelly as the Retard Academy. In their world, the special needs students are wallpaper, seen but not acknowledged. But today is different. They are on a quest, fueled by puberty and curiosity, to find a rumored pornographic picture of Tina Jean Schlossinger, the homecoming queen, supposedly tacked to a bulletin board in the abandoned Tracker Brothers shipping depot. It is a quintessential coming-of-age setup, the forbidden fruit in the haunted house. But as they approach the overgrown driveway of the depot, the tone shifts from adventure to unease. They find artifacts. A ripped Derry Tigers football shirt, number 19, belonging to Richie Grenadeau. Then a yellow Scooby-Doo lunchbox. The lunchbox bears a sticker, "I belong to Douglas Cavell." The scene they stumble upon behind the depot is a tableau of cruelty. Richie Grenadeau, the high school football star with a broken nose, along with two cronies, Duncan and a hulking brute named Scott, are tormenting a boy. The victim is kneeling, half naked in his underoos, weeping. It is Dudits. They are trying to force him to eat dog feces. This moment defines the group's morality. Despite being outmatched in size and age, Henry Devlin steps forward. He is driven not just by justice, but by a visceral reaction to Duddits crying, a sound of pure, bewildered hurt that drills into his skull. Henry uses his intellect as a weapon, threatening to expose Richie, leveraging the bully's fear of reputation loss. He coordinates his friends, telling Pete to run and get the police if the bullies attack, knowing Pete is the fastest. The standoff is tense. The threat of violence hangs heavy, but the bullies, unnerved by the younger boy's unity and Henry's icy confidence, retreat. They leave behind a shattered, weeping child. It is here that Beaver, the group's often ridiculed joker, performs a miracle. He kneels before the sobbing Duddits and begins to sing. It's a lullaby, Baby's Boat's a Silver Dream, sung in a clear, sweet tenor that silences the weeping. It is a moment of transcendent grace. The music bridges the gap between them. Duddits calms, bonding instantly with Beaver. He speaks in his unique, vowel-heavy dialect, "ooh," or meaning school, and introduces himself, "I Duddits." They help him dress, tying his shoes, restoring his dignity. The quest for the dirty picture is forgotten, replaced by a new mission, walking Duddits home. But before they leave, Jonesy checks the window of the depot. The picture is there, but it's not the homecoming queen. It's just an old woman. The sexual grail was a lie. "We came for him," Jonesy says, realizing the true purpose of their detour. They didn't find a picture. They found the fifth member of their circle. Back in the present, the memory releases Pete. He is drunker now, the beer soothing his edges, but the atmosphere has shifted. A low humming sound begins in his head, a rhythmic thudding like a transformer. He hears a name, Marcy. He looks up and sees lights in the sky, faint and moth-like. He speaks to the empty air. "Tell Marcy to make them give me a shot." These are not his thoughts. He is tuning into a frequency not meant for him. He starts his walk back to the woman, his knee feeling deceptively loose, until it betrays him completely. It explodes with pain, sending him pitching face first into the snow, screaming as the bottles shatter. Chapter 6. The perspective shifts to Henry Devlin. He is a man running against time, jogging through the snow toward the hunting camp. Hole in the wall. Henry is a psychiatrist, a man of science, but the veneer of rationality is stripping away mile by mile. He is driven by a deep psychic intuition that disaster lies both behind him with Pete and ahead of him at the camp. Henry's run is a fugue state of physical exertion and mental intrusion. He adopts a mantra to match the rhythm of his feet. 8 more miles to Banbury Cross. He is trying to outrun his own suicidal depression, which has haunted him for months. But now a new fear overrides it. He too sees the animals fleeing. He dodges foxes and bears, realizing the woods are emptying out. The telepathic static that Pete felt is stronger for Henry. He hears the voices clearly now. He hears the woman Becky screaming, "They're back." He hears fragments of conversation from his friends, Beaver telling someone to look in a chamber pot, Jonesy suggesting they knock on a door. He hears a stranger's voice, a man named Rick talking about his sick stomach. This is the line, the telepathic web that binds the 4 friends, now amplified to a terrifying degree. It's like picking up a live power line of consciousness. Henry realizes that the Duddits phenomenon, the way they could sometimes read each other's thoughts or find lost things, is spiking. The quarantine of their individual minds is breaking down. He suspects it's connected to the lights in the sky, to the woman with the auto-cannibalistic smell. As he runs, the voices fade, replaced by the thumping of a helicopter overhead, a dark shark shape in the clouds. It passes, leaving him alone with his dread. To keep his sanity, Henry also retreats to the past, to the aftermath of the rescue at the Tracker Brothers depot. The memory continues. The boys are at the window. They have found Duddits. The bond formed that day was sealed not just by the rescue, but by the acceptance. Duddits, with his Ooby-Doo lunchbox and his unconditional love, became their totem. They walked him home to Maple Lane, a procession of knights escorting a king. That act of kindness, Jonesy would later say, was their finest hour. It anchored them. It gave them a center. But in the present, the anchor is gone. Henry slips in the snow, the physical jolt snapping him back to the road. He is hurt, bleeding from the nose, spitting out a loose tooth. The physical deterioration mirrors the psychic assault. Suddenly, a scream tears through his mind. Ow, ow, ow. It is deafening, a shotgun blast inside his skull. Henry knows with sickening certainty that this is Pete. Pete has fallen. Pete is in agony. Henry staggers, nearly colliding with a pine tree. The psychic feedback loop is open. He knows something terrible has happened at the camp. The intuition is no longer a hunch. It is a broadcast. He forces himself to run again, the mantra changing. 3 more miles to Banbury Cross. Then the world shifts. Henry stops in the middle of the road, paralyzed by a new sensation. It is not a voice. It is a cloud, a red-black cloud rushing toward him from the direction of the camp. It is a psychic entity, a storm of malevolent energy. Henry perceives it as a movie, the kind of scary sci-fi film Jonesy loves. Terror, primal and absolute, seizes him. He hears the whine of a snowmobile engine approaching from the camp. It is the Arctic cat. But his mind screams a warning. Get off the road, hide. This is the most dangerous moment of Henry's life. The approaching entity is not human, it is Mr. Grey. The name manifests in his mind, attached to the red-black cloud. It brings with it images of horror, milk running down a senile father's chin, the panic in a patient's eyes, the stark reality of death camps and torture. It is the essence of infection, the realization that everything can be corrupted. Henry fights through the taffy-thick air, his body rebelling against the fear, and throws himself into the trees. He crawls behind a spruce, burying his face in the moss, trying to stifle his own breathing. He knows that if this thing perceives him, he is lost. The snowmobile roars closer. Henry peeks through the screen of pine needles. He sees the headlight cutting the gloom. As the machine flashes past, Henry sees the driver. It is Jonesy. But it is not Jonesy. The figure on the snowmobile is the generator of the red-black cloud. It is the vessel for Mr. Grey. The entity has taken his friend. Henry bites into the moss to keep from screaming, tasting the dirt and bark as the alien presence speeds west toward Pete and the woman. The horror of the situation crystallizes for Henry as the engine noise fades. The suicide he had contemplated seems trivial now. The stakes have shifted from personal despair to existential survival. He stumbles back onto the road, nose bleeding, weeping, limping toward the camp. He knows the truth now. The hunting trip is over. One friend is dead, one is dying, and Jonesy has become a meat puppet for something that came from the lights in the sky. The same shit, different day has finally ended. The change they feared in adolescence has arrived, not as adulthood, but as an invasion. And Henry is walking straight into the aftermath. Chapter 7. The horror in the bathroom at Hole in the Wall has moved beyond the realm of simple illness into something primal and obscene. We find Beaver Clarendon stripping away his usual colourful slang, left with only the rawest curse words to process the sight before him. The scene is lit by the harsh, flickering glare of generator-powered fluorescent lights, lending the room the sterile, jerky quality of a crime scene photograph. This lighting is cruel. It hides nothing. The baby blue tiles are smeared with a trail of blood that looks like a red snake, spreading into scarlet capillaries. But the blood isn't the only anomaly. There is a reddish-golden mold, a fuzzy mildew blooming rapidly within the bloody fingerprints and the grout. This is our first real look at the byproduct of the infection, a rapidly spreading alien flora that thrives on biological waste. McCarthy sits on the toilet, naked except for his orange hunting cap, which sits askew on his head. He appears almost comatose, chin on his chest. Jonesy and Beaver, despite their terror, are forced to confront the physical reality of the man. His body tells a grotesque story. His stomach hangs in slack folds, distended and split with tiny stretch marks, reminiscent of a woman who has given birth multiple times. It's a perverse subversion of life. Instead of carrying a child, McCarthy has been serving as an incubator for a parasite. The irony of McCarthy's earlier biblical muttering, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock," comes crashing down on Jonesy. He realizes too late that he should never have opened that door. The tension spikes when McCarthy emits a sound that is both comical and terrifying. A loud, wet release of gas that smells of ether and airplane glue. This isn't normal biological waste. It's the exhaust of something alien. Then comes a splash, heavy and muscular, like a large fish jumping in a pond. When Beaver tries to rouse McCarthy, the man finally collapses, tumbling off the toilet and into the bathtub with a sickening crack of bone against porcelain. The movement reveals the true horror. McCarthy's posterior has been blown open, a crater of bloody ruin where something has violently exited. The boys are now faced with a containment scenario. Something is alive in the toilet bowl. It splashes against the underside of the lid, strong and frantic. Jonesy, thinking fast, orders Beaver to sit on the lid to keep it trapped. It's a moment of desperate improvisation. They are operating on the logic of horror movies, referencing Alien and Lethal Weapon, trying to contextualize their nightmare through pop culture because reality has failed them. Jonesy decides he needs friction tape to seal the lid so they can escape on the snowmobile, leaving Beaver as the living weight keeping the monster contained. As Jonesy rushes to the shed, King gives us a crucial window into Beaver's internal world. Alone on the toilet seat, terrified, Beaver retreats into memory. He thinks of Duddits. This flashback is essential. It juxtaposes the filth and violence of the present with the purity of their past. We see the day they met Douglas Duddits Cavell. He was a boy with Down syndrome, being tormented by bullies, stripped of his clothes, and crying for his mother. Beaver and the others didn't just intervene, they formed a protective circle around him. We see Mrs. Cavell, Duddits' mother, expecting the worst from these rough-looking boys, only to realize they are her son's saviors. This moment cements the quartet, the destined group. They didn't just save Duddits. Duddits saved them, binding them together with love and a touch of the supernatural, the line they can sometimes see or hear. Beaver remembers how they walked Duddits to school for years, protecting him, treating him not as a burden but as their cool friend. This love for Duddits is the emotional anchor of the story, making the impending tragedy infinitely heavier. It reminds us that these men, now facing a shitweasel in a bathroom, were once the knights of a gentle, disabled boy. Back in the present, the tragedy unfolds with the inevitability of a falling blade. Jonesy struggles to find the tape in the cluttered shed, losing precious minutes. Meanwhile, Beaver's anxiety manifests in his oldest nervous tic, chewing toothpicks. He tries to reach for a clean one on the floor, momentarily shifting his weight off the toilet seat. It is a fatal error, born of a mundane habit. The creature beneath him strikes with terrifying speed. It is not a worm, but a muscular, reddish-gold, lamprey-like entity. It smashes the seat upward, catching Beaver in the groin. The description here is visceral body horror at its peak. The creature wraps around him, crushing his testicles, and begins to chatter like a rabid monkey. Beaver fights, but he is outmatched by the sheer ferocity of the organism. The creature, a virus entity, displays a disturbing biology. It stiffens like a phallus and possesses a nest of needle teeth. It attacks Beaver's face, tearing into him. Jonesy returns too late. He finds Beaver in the ruins of the bathroom, the creature feasting on him. Beaver, in his final moments, proves his loyalty one last time. Despite his agony, with his nose torn away and his life pouring out, he screams for Jonesy to get out, to lock the door. He tries to hold the creature, to sacrifice himself to buy his friend time. Beaver dies thinking of the toothpicks, a tragic small thought in the face of cosmic horror. Jonesy slams the door, trapping the creature inside, but the nightmare escalates. The creature is strong enough to turn the doorknob. Jonesy engages in a tug-of-war with the monster, holding the knob with all his strength as the wood begins to splinter. He can hear the creature's teeth working through the door, a relentless mechanical gnawing. The grief hits Jonesy amidst the panic, the realization that the circle is broken. Beaver is dead. The carefree days of the Duddits game and their shared childhood are over, drowned in blood. Suddenly the resistance on the knob ceases. The connection rod snaps. But before Jonesy can flee, he turns to find he is not alone in the main room. Standing there is a grey man, the archetypal alien of modern folklore, with the bulbous head and black teardrop eyes. But this is not the invincible invader of movies. This entity is sick, dying. Its skin hangs in loose elephantine folds, weeping a yellow pus that matches the fungus in the bathroom. The grey man speaks into Jonesy's mind, not with a voice but with pure telepathy. It projects a sense of exhaustion and a plea. Marcy. I can't stand it. Give me a shot. Where's Marcy? These are the thoughts of a dying junkie, or perhaps a confused patient, filtering through the alien consciousness. It is the click, the psychic line that Duddits opened in them years ago. Jonesy realizes that death, which had missed him during his accident in the city, has finally caught up. The grey man's head suddenly ruptures, exploding not into gore, but into a cloud of red-orange spores. It is a biological detonation. Jonesy breathes in the ether-smelling cloud, inhaling the essence of the invader. The chapter ends not with a bang, but with an infection. Jonesy has been breached, and the invasion has moved from the physical space of the cabin into the internal landscape of his mind. Chapter 8. In the quiet despair of West Derry Acres, we find Roberta Cavell, a woman clinging to the floral print remnants of a gentler past. She sits with her son, Duddits, a man in his 30s trapped forever in the innocence of childhood by Down syndrome. But there is a darker thief of time at work here. Leukemia is consuming Duddits. A vampire Roberta cannot fight with garlic or steaks. While Duddits fades, the outside world descends into chaos on the television screen. The news reports are fragmented, speaking of missing hunters in the Jefferson Tract and strange silent lights in the sky. Classic UFO phenomena, or flaps, disrupting the mundane rhythm of afternoon soap operas. We see the military's response through the lens of a press conference featuring Abraham Kurtz, a man whose pale eyes and white lashes betray a soulful emptiness. Kurtz dismisses questions about extraterrestrials with a cynical "E.T. phone home," a chilling subversion of pop culture that masks a brutal reality. We are witnessing the government's containment protocol in real time as a Cessna pilot is ordered to turn back from an interdicted zone. The terminology suggests a quarantine, hinting that the biological threat is just as potent as the aerial one. The domestic tension shatters when Duddits screams. It is not a cry of physical pain, though his body is failing, but a psychic shriek tearing through the mother-son bond. Roberta rushes to him, fearing a hemorrhage, only to find him physically intact but spiritually ravaged. Duddits, the emotional anchor of the childhood friend group, possesses a terrifying clarity. He isn't screaming about his own dying blood. He is screaming for a severed connection. His wail, "Beaver's dead," confirms a metaphysical tragedy. The circle of friends has been broken, and the horror up north has claimed its first victim of the inner circle. Chapter 9. Meanwhile, in the frozen hell of the Jefferson Tract, Pete Moore is paying the price for his addictions. After crashing the Scout, he wakes in a snow-covered rut, his knee shattered, a physical manifestation of his broken life. Driven by an alcoholic's desperate homing instinct, he crawls back toward the lean-to, dragging a bag of beer that symbolizes his fatal flaw. The journey is a hallucination of pain, where time distorts. His watch runs backward, a subtle law indication that the alien presence warps the laws of physics. Reaching the campsite, Pete finds the woman, Becky, dead. The horror here is biological and invasive. She hasn't just died from the elements. Something has erupted from her. The description of her ruined clothing and the reddish-gold fungus spreading on her corpse creates a gruesome tableau of reproduction gone wrong. The Ripley fungus, or Byram, thrives on heat and flesh, turning the dead woman into a nursery for a monster. Pete's mind, heightened by the proximity to the alien entity, becomes a receiver for a telepathic slaughter. He hears the voices of the Kansas street gang, specifically the ghost of Beaver, but he also hears something worse: the collective screams of the aliens. In a twisted reversal of the invader trope, the extraterrestrials are begging for mercy, crying out that they are defenseless. But the human military response, led by the cold logic of Kurtz, views them merely as cancer to be excised with radioactive chemotherapy. Survival becomes a primal struggle when the entity that killed Becky reveals itself, a shitweasel, a serpentine creature of teeth and muscle. It drops from the lean-to roof, attacking Pete with the ferocity of a starving animal. This confrontation strips Pete of his modern defenses. He is forced to use fire, the oldest weapon, to incinerate the parasite clinging to his hand. The victory is Pyrrhic. The lean-to collapses, leaving him exposed. As the chapter closes, the isolation is total. The machine guns silencing the aliens in the distance cease, followed by a massive explosion that signals a catastrophic escalation. Pete, now maimed and infected by the rapid-growing fungus, sits in the wreckage. He feels the alien growth feeding on his open wounds, a fizzy, consuming sensation. Jonesy, or the entity wearing Jonesy's skin, is approaching on a snowmobile, but for Pete, the fight is effectively over. He waits for the end, watching the alien cancer bloom on his own flesh. Chapter 10. The snow begins to fall over the Jefferson Tract, masking the impending atrocity in a blanket of white. We find ourselves at Gosselin's Country Market, a mundane beer and deer store now repurposed as Blue Base. Here, the machinery of a covert government operation grinds into gear with terrifying efficiency. At the center of this storm stands Kurtz, a man who seems less like a soldier and more like a void in the shape of a human being. His new aide, Archie Perlmutter, is already learning the first rule of survival in Kurtz's orbit: terror. Perlmutter is frantic, trying to manage the logistics of detaining civilians, but Kurtz is operating on a different frequency. King introduces us here to the concept of the fuka. In Irish folklore, it's a ghost horse that kidnaps travelers. For Kurtz, it's a military doctrine, an operation that is simultaneously covert and wide open, a paradox. This is the psychological landscape Kurtz inhabits, where contradictions are weapons. He speaks of the operation with a chilling bureaucratic detachment, yet his eyes hold a cataclysmic absence, a stare that goes on for light years. This isn't just a commander. This is a man who has stared into the abyss so long that the abyss is now issuing orders. Owen Underhill arrives on a commandeered school bus with his A-team. The scene is absurdly American. They are eating Burger King while preparing for first contact with an alien species. This juxtaposition of the banal, cholesterol concerns and fast food, against the cosmic horror of an extraterrestrial infection, highlights the surreal nature of the crisis. They are treating the apocalypse like a road trip. Inside the store, the true nature of the threat, and the government's knowledge of it, becomes clear. Underhill plays a tape for Kurtz. It's a broadcast coming from the alien ship. The voices are synthesized, mimicking human celebrities: Bill Clinton, Brad Pitt, Sarah Jessica Parker, pleading in English and French. We are helpless. There is no infection here. It is a desperate cry for mercy, or perhaps a mimicry of it. The use of celebrity voices adds a layer of uncanny horror. The aliens are trying to communicate by wearing our pop culture like a skin suit, not realizing how grotesque it sounds. Kurtz, however, is unmoved. He is focused on the Ripley, the code name for the reddish-gold fungus spreading through the zone. Named after Sigourney Weaver's character in Alien, or perhaps the Believe It or Not oddities, the fungus is the biological weapon of this invasion. But the biological threat is secondary to the mental one. Kurtz demonstrates that the aliens are telepathic. He asks Underhill to guess a car and an ice cream flavor. Underhill, a non-believer, instantly guesses Ferrari and pistachio. He even pulls the name of Kurtz's brother from the ether. The implication is staggering. The infection isn't just physical, it's psychic. Thoughts are leaking. Privacy is obsolete. Kurtz warns that if this telepathy spreads, it leads to total insanity. It's a brilliant narrative device. The aliens don't just kill you, They dissolve the boundaries of your individual self. The mission parameters are set. They are to wipe out the Grey Boys. No witnesses. Underhill, despite his reservations, falls in line. He remembers a previous black op in Bosnia, the Fuka ride where children watched them extract a pilot, and the silence that followed. Underhill is a man who follows orders, but the cracks in his conscience are beginning to show. He knows this isn't war, it's slaughter. As the gunships prepare to launch, the weather forces a delay. In this pause, we see the duality of the men. They are listening to Pearl Jam, reading newspapers, acting like bored employees, yet they are about to commit genocide. When the order finally comes, Underhill makes a choice. As they approach the crash site, a massive grey disc shattered in a swamp. He broadcasts the alien plea over the squad channel. He forces the men to hear the voices of their victims begging for their lives. "We are dying." It is a subtle act of rebellion, but Kurtz, monitoring from his scout helicopter, crushes it immediately. He hijacks the radio channel and delivers a sermon that is pure, distilled manipulation. He acknowledges the pathetic sight below. Naked, sexless creatures standing in the cold, seemingly harmless. Then he twists the narrative. He calls them a cancer. He invokes the fear of the implants, parasitic organisms that eat hosts from the inside. He paints a picture of a Super Bowl of survival, mixing religious fervor with military jargon, ending his speech with "Praise Jesus." It is a masterclass in dehumanization. He turns their pity into revulsion, their hesitation into righteous fury. He flips his cap backward, a signal that the game is on. Underhill, listening to this, retreats into a dark memory from his childhood. He recalls a neighbor, Mrs. Rapallo, suffering a stroke. While she was being taken away, a young Underhill went into her house. He didn't go to help, he went to destroy. He tried to defile her toothbrush and shattered a serving platter. He remembers the sexual thrill, the hard dingus, the rush of senseless destruction. This flashback is crucial. It suggests that Underhill isn't just a soldier following orders. There is a dormant, destructive urge within him, a low man waiting to be let out. The violence of the mission resonates with a primal, broken part of his own psyche. The attack begins. Underhill cues the music, the Rolling Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil." The irony is palpable. As Mick Jagger sings about being a man of wealth and taste who stole many a man's soul, the gunships open fire on the defenseless Grey Boys. The scene is a massacre. The heavy 50 caliber rounds tear the aliens apart. King describes the carnage not with blood, but with pink sap and grisly produce baskets as heads explode. The aliens, hands raised in surrender, are obliterated, but the Ripley fungus fights back. As the ship and the bodies are destroyed, they release a storm of spores, a reddish-gold whirlwind. 2 of the gunships fly too close. They are consumed. One crashes into the swamp. The other explodes in a ball of fire. The helpless victims were essentially biological bombs. Underhill orders a retreat, pulling his remaining birds back to a safe distance. He saved what was left of his squadron, but the cost has been absolute moral bankruptcy. In the aftermath, Kurtz commends Underhill, playing the role of the proud father figure. "Good shooting, better flying," he says. But privately, on a secure channel to his pilot Freddie, Kurtz marks Underhill for death. "Underhill stays here," he orders. It is the final betrayal. Underhill served his purpose as the executioner. Now he is a loose end. Kurtz, ever the pragmatist, knows that witnesses to a Fuka operation cannot be allowed to survive. As the chapter closes, the true horror settles in. Flying back to base, Underhill looks at his pilot's hands. On the thumbnail, there is a fine line of reddish-gold fuzz. The infection has breached the cockpit. The slaughter didn't stop the contagion. It likely accelerated it. Underhill looks at his own hands, waiting for the mark. He thinks of the biblical story of Cain, the first murderer, marked by God, so all would know what he had done. The physical infection of the Ripley fungus and the moral stain of the massacre have become one and the same. They have committed an unforgivable sin, and now, like Cain, they bear the mark. The Grey Boys are dead, but the cancer Kurt spoke of has already metastasized, not just in the woods of Maine, but in the souls of the men who pulled the trigger. Chapter 11. Suicide is rarely a silent partner. For Henry Devlin, it had become a conversationalist. It spoke in a broken, insistent pidgin, a voice that had offered him a strange comfort in recent months, promising an end to the noise of living. But today, the allure of that voice was drowned out by a far more visceral horror. Henry stood in the snow, watching the snowmobile tear away. It was Jonesy's body on the machine, but the entity driving it was something else entirely. A cold, alien intellect that had shoved his friend's consciousness into a dark, suffocating corner. Henry could sense the intrusion, a telepathic awareness that Jonesy was still in there, buried deep, but powerless against the Mr. Grey entity now at the wheel. With nowhere else to go, Henry turned back toward the hunting cabin. Hole in the wall. The emotional weight of the place, once a sanctuary of childhood friendship, was now heavy with dread. As he approached the open door, the smell hit him first. It wasn't the scent of pine or wood smoke, but a marshy, sulphurous stench, the odor of the sick woman who had started this nightmare. The cabin was no longer a haven. It was a biological hazard zone. A reddish-gold growth, something between moss and fungus, was consuming the structure. It carpeted the welcome mat and had begun to devour the interior, growing with a terrifying, unnatural speed. Henry, utilizing his medical training to compartmentalize the horror, realized that this wasn't just an infection, it was colonization. He donned painter's masks found in the shed, a flimsy defense against an airborne plague, and stepped inside. The transformation was total. The Navajo rug was obliterated by the red fuzz, and the Dreamcatcher, the symbol of their shared history, was now a grotesque web of alien matter. It had caught a nightmare indeed. The epicenter of the horror was the bathroom. A hill of matted fungus blocked the doorway, formed over a shape that Henry knew with sinking despair was the remains of their friend Beaver. The only identifying marker was a single Doc Marten boot protruding from the red mass. Beaver, the man who believed his footwear was a lesbian solidarity statement, was gone, consumed by the alien flora. Henry's grief was sharp and immediate, but his survival instinct, dormant for so long under his suicidal depression, suddenly roared to life. He wasn't going to die here. Not like this. He grabbed Jonesy's M1 Garand rifle, but the true threat wasn't in the bathroom. It was in the bedroom. Driven by a morbid compulsion, Henry investigated the source of a rustling sound. There, on Jonesy's bed, was the progenitor of the plague. It looked like a weasel but warped, amputated legs, massive black eyes, and a mouth filled with needle-like fangs. It was guarding a clutch of gelatinous pulsing eggs. This is the moment where the human mind snaps to preserve itself. Faced with the sight of these eggs hatching, releasing tiny, thread-like worms with pinhead eyes, Henry's psyche fractured. He began to chant, manic and terrified, quoting the Beatles. "I am the Eggman," he announced to the empty room, dissociating from the reality that he was about to incinerate an alien brood. It's a profound psychological defense mechanism. When reality becomes too grotesque to process, the mind retreats into the absurd. Henry found lighter fluid and matches. He wasn't a psychiatrist anymore. He was an exterminator. He doused the bed, the writhing worms, and the eggs, then struck a match. The fire bloomed instantly, a cleansing force against the biological perversion. The eggs popped and sizzled, the sound of burning larvae mixing with Henry's manic recitation of "I am the walrus." He retreated as the fire jumped to the walls, the heat pushing him out into the freezing air. He had given Beaver a Viking funeral and purged the cabin, destroying the physical anchor of their past to prevent the alien spread. Outside, Henry strapped on a pair of ancient cross-country skis. He was exhausted, traumatized and injured, yet he had to move. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the crushing reality of his situation. He was miles from civilization, skiing through a snowstorm with a nagging voice in his head. Not the suicidal one this time, but the lyrics of songs looping endlessly. This auditory hallucination is common in extreme fatigue. The brain latches onto rhythm to keep the body moving. He sang the Rolling Stones, the music blending with the memory of Duddits, their childhood friend, who was the glue of their circle. His journey took him past the collapsed lean-to, where they had left the infected woman, Becky Shue. She was dead, covered in the fungus, but Henry noted a critical biological detail. The cold was killing the growth. The red fuzz on her body was thriving in her lingering warmth, but the tendrils reaching into the snow were grey and dying. This alien life required heat. It was a weakness. Henry continued tracking the snowmobile, finding the spot where the vehicle had stopped at the overturned Scout. The tracks told a story without words. The alien-controlled Jonesy had stopped here to collect peat. Henry found Pete's empty beer cans and the name Duddits written in the snow, a desperate message from a friend who knew he was doomed. Inside the wrecked Scout, Henry found food. His revulsion at the red-colored hot dogs was overpowered by starving hunger. He ate voraciously, his body demanding fuel despite the horrors he had witnessed. This scene underscores the primal nature of survival. Dignity and disgust are luxuries for the safe. Henry, covered in grime and sweat, eating cold hot dogs in a wrecked car, had been stripped to his core. Resuming his trek, Henry realized the snowmobile tracks veered off into the deep woods, away from the road to civilization. Jonesy, or the thing inside him, was avoiding the military cordon. And there was definitely a cordon. The sky ahead was lit up with high-intensity floodlights, and the sound of heavy helicopters and jet fighters tore through the air. The government had arrived, and they were bringing war to the Jefferson Tract. The scale of the response suggested this wasn't a rescue mission, it was containment, a quarantine of lethal force. Henry reached the junction of the deep-cut road, physically shattered. His legs were trembling, his vision blurring. He had to choose between the dark woods and the blinding lights of the military blockade. He chose the lights. As he skied down the final hill, his coordination failed. He crashed spectacularly, losing his skis and tumbling into the snow, just as a voice amplified by a bullhorn commanded him to halt. Blinding spotlights pinned him against the white ground. He looked up to see a squad of soldiers in hazmat masks, training automatic weapons on his chest. The absurdity of his life, a suicidal psychiatrist who survived an alien infestation only to be nearly gunned down by his own government, bubbled up in his throat. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was past fear, residing in a place of hysterical clarity. A package of hot dogs had fallen from his pocket during the crash. The voice on the bullhorn screamed at him not to touch it, assuming it was a weapon or a biological sample. Henry, defying the lethal tension of the moment, picked up the package. He stood before the firing squad, a broken man in a torn coat, and offered them a processed meat stick. "I come in peace," the Eggman said, grinning through the pain and the madness. "Who wants a hot dog?" Chapter 12. The mind is a labyrinth, a construct of corridors and locked doors, and for Gary Jones, it has become a theatre of the macabre where the past plays out on an infinite, agonizing loop. We find him trapped in the sticky web of March 15th, the day his life bifurcated from normalcy into nightmare. It feels like a dream, yet possesses the cruel weight of reality. Jonesy is forced to relive the 8 months of rehabilitation, the screaming agony of stretching atrophied tendons, and the small victories, wiping himself, making love to his wife, the simple, profound act of living. But the loop always circles back to the Ides of March. This is the psychological horror of trauma, the inability to escape the moment of impact. Jonesy's consciousness, currently under siege, attempts to rewrite the script. He tries to warn his past self, screaming from the future to take a taxi, to avoid the intersection of Mass Ave and Prospect. But time, in this narrative, is immutable. The grandfather paradox holds firm. The lines are down. He sees himself walking toward destiny, humming a tune, oblivious to the encroaching darkness. However, the memory shifts, tainted by the present alien infection. Jonesy sees Duddits Cavell across the street, humiliated and eating filth, a vision that explains why Jonesy stepped off the curb without looking. It was an act of protective instinct. But the true revelation is the deer. In this replayed memory, the buck he thought he saw is revealed as a man in an orange vest, carrying a legless weasel-like horror. The Lincoln Town car strikes, the hip snaps, and darkness descends. But this darkness is different. It is the void of the cloud, the telepathic ether of the invading species. Jonesy is not merely unconscious, he is disassociated, viewing the scene from a high angle, a phenomenon often reported in near-death experiences but here twisted by the alien presence. He sees the grey man, the infected stranger McCarthy, standing among the onlookers, a spectral harbinger of the colonization to come. Jonesy watches his own clinical death in the ambulance, a detail his conscious mind had suppressed. He flatlines, rides the lightning of the defibrillator, and is brought back. But the resurrection is not into the world of the living, but into a mental construct. He finds himself in a hospital corridor within his own mind. This is a fascinating manifestation of the memory palace technique, weaponized for survival. Jonesy realizes that while his body is being hijacked, his consciousness remains unique, floating within the alien cloud like an insoluble particle. He is the ghost in his own machine. He enters a hospital room in this mental construct, a space rotting with virus, the reddish-gold alien fungus. In the bed lies the intruder, Mr. Grey. The entity is dying, its physical form decaying, yet its consciousness is robust and commanding. This scene represents the biological symbiosis at play. The alien needs the human host not just for mobility, but for existence. Beside the grey creature lies the weasel, the sharp-toothed biological imperative of the species. Here, a psychic negotiation occurs. Mr. Grey and Jonesy agree to a truce, shielding their deepest secrets in a mental crib, a locked box of the subconscious. Jonesy hides the truth about Dudits and their shared telepathic power, while Mr. Grey hides his ultimate agenda. They settle in to watch a movie on a fungus-encrusted television, a meta-narrative device where the screen displays what is happening to Jonesy's physical body in the real world. The perspective shifts to the snowy reality of the Jefferson Tract. Jonesy's body, now commandeered by Mr. Grey, is in the shed at Hole in the Wall. The alien intelligence struggles with the mechanics of a snowmobile, a machine alien to its experience. To solve this, Mr. Grey demonstrates the terrifying reach of the hive mind. He psychically reaches out and hijacks the mind of an army mechanic, Emil Brodsky, miles away at the quarantine perimeter. This is a chilling display of the network capability of the aliens. Brodsky, a simple man amidst the chaos of the military operation, suddenly becomes a remote-controlled encyclopedia for the alien. Mr. Grey steals the knowledge of spark plugs and fuel lines directly from Brodsky's synapses, leaving the soldier confused and hollowed out. It underscores a central theme. To these invaders, humans are not sentient beings, but resource containers, batteries of biology and information to be drained and discarded. Back in the mental landscape, Jonesy retreats to a new safe haven. He abandons the infected hospital room for a memory of the Tracker brothers' old office, a place from his childhood. It is dusty, filled with teenage artifacts, and most importantly, it is his. This retreat suggests that the only defense against total assimilation is the preservation of the core self, the fundamental memories that define identity. Jonesy is now a stowaway in his own vessel, a tiny spark of rebellion hiding in the dark. In the physical world, the horror escalates. A massive explosion rocks the forest, the military destroying the alien ship. Mr. Gray, indifferent to the loss, focuses on escape. He finds Pete Moore in the snow. Pete is in a wretched state, his body ravaged by the virus, his mind nearing collapse. But Mr. Gray does not see a dying friend. He sees a navigational tool. The interaction between Mr. Gray and Pete is one of pure, calculated cruelty. Mr. Gray forces the dying Pete onto the snowmobile. When Pete resists, Mr. Gray psychically accelerates the growth of the fungus, torturing Pete until he complies. This moment solidifies the alien's nature. It possesses intelligence without empathy, logic without morality. As they ride through the darkening woods, guided by a dying alien flashlight floating in the air, Jonesy watches helplessly from his mental window. He can feel Pete's despair. Pete has become a culture medium, a living petri dish for the alien moss. Yet there is a flicker of the old bond. Jonesy manages to whisper a mental message to Pete. No bounce, no play. It is their childhood mantra, a code of endurance. Pete hears it. In the midst of his agony, he recognizes his friend is still in there. The alien flashlight dies, leaving them in the encroaching night. Mr. Gray demands direction. He is heading north, toward the population centers, toward the turnpike, where he can spread the infection to the world. He forces Pete to use his own telepathic gift, the line, to navigate. Pete, barely holding on to sanity, points the way. He is broken, his eye socket overgrown with alien vegetation, a grotesque fusion of man and moss. The journey is a death march. They dodge military helicopters, hiding in the brush. The weather worsens, reflecting the bleakness of their prospects. Finally, Pete can go no further. He falls from the machine, his body consumed, his utility exhausted. Mr. Gray's reaction to Pete's collapse is the final severance of humanity. He tells Pete he has served his purpose. Jonesy screams in protest from his mental prison, but the alien is deaf to mercy. Mr. Gray triggers a lethal acceleration of the virus within Pete. The fungus clenches deep in Pete's brain, cracking his skull, ending his life in a moment of brutal biological mechanics. Jonesy is left alone with the monster. The grief is overwhelming, but it is hardened by resolve. Mr. Gray believes he has won, that he is the future, driving the stolen body toward the highway lights in the distance. He claims that his kind always wins, that they are the inevitable evolution. But he makes a critical error. He underestimates the resilience of the human spirit, and specifically, he remains ignorant of the Duddits factor. Jonesy, gazing out from his dusty mental office, holds on to his secret. He is the last line of defense, a passenger on a vehicle of doom, waiting for the moment to derail the inevitable. The chapter closes on the image of the snowmobile cutting through the dark, a microscopic war for the survival of the species taking place within the mind of a single, broken man. Chapter 13. For Archie Perlmutter, a man whose life had been defined by the rigid structures of West Point and the clear-cut morality of the Eagle Scouts, reality had warped. Gosselin's country market was no longer just a rural outpost in the Maine snowy wilderness. It had been transformed into a surreal, high-budget movie set. The sheer wattage of the floodlights turned the blizzard into a theatrical backdrop, illuminating the dilapidated siding and rusty gas pumps with an artificial brilliance that felt entirely staged. Perlmutter, clutching his clipboard, found himself framing the scene through a cinematic lens, perhaps a James Cameron spectacle, where the budget for catering exceeded the GDP of a small nation. It was a psychological defense mechanism, of course. If this were merely Act 1 of a sci-fi thriller, then the horrors unfolding weren't truly happening. He wasn't alone in this cognitive dissonance. Beside him stumbled Melrose, a lowly cook's third, shivering in sneakers that were woefully inadequate for the deepening snow. They were marching through a zone of organized chaos, idling helicopters, shouting men and trailers humming with generated power. But the true horror lay in the paddock. The old corral, once home to horses, now held American citizens behind electrified wire. It was a grim tableau that stripped away the illusion of a rescue mission. These men were not being saved, they were being contained. And the soldiers guarding them, their faces obscured by masks, had lost their hesitancy after witnessing the lethal consequences of disobedience. The power dynamic had shifted from negotiation to absolute lethal control. Melrose was terrified, whining about why the big boy, Kurtz, would summon a kitchen nobody. Perlmutter had no answer, but the dread in his gut suggested it wasn't for a commendation. As they navigated Egg-Beater Alley, they passed Owen Underhill, Kurtz's second in command. Underhill looked aged, worn down by a burden that went beyond physical fatigue. He was deep in conversation with the motor pool chief Brodsky, known as Dog. Underhill was engaged in a quiet, terrifying extraction of information. He needed to know about Brodsky's brush with the alien consciousness. Brodsky described a sensation of mental hijacking, a mind fuck. He hadn't just heard a voice, he had been inhabited. He described being in a shed with a stranger, Jonesy, who needed help fixing a snowmobile. Brodsky had seen through the stranger's eyes, diagnosed the problem as missing spark plugs, and guided the stranger to fix it. It was a violation of the self, a telepathic rape that left Brodsky feeling hollowed out. What's critical here is the fluid nature of the infection. It isn't just the biological Ripley fungus, but a permeation of the mind. The barriers between individuals were dissolving. Underhill, realizing the strategic value of this, ordered Brodsky to silence. He then turned his attention to a prisoner waving frantically from the corral. The prisoner was Henry Devlin. He looked desperate, shouting names that stopped Underhill cold: Rita and Katrina. These were the names of Underhill's wife and daughter. It was a chilling confirmation that the telepathy was spreading, leaking secrets like radiation. But Underhill, bound by duty and the ticking clock of Kurtz's summons, forced himself to walk away. He was a man trapped in the machinery of the operation, unable to pause for humanity. Inside the command Winnebago, the atmosphere shifted from the cold chaos outside to a suffocating, overheated madness. This was the lair of the beast. Kurtz sat in a rocking chair, stripped down to his long johns, his 9mm pistol hanging from the chair post, like a casual accessory. The room was a shrine to his fractured psyche, a photo of an innocent Boy Scout next to a photo of bombed-out Berlin. Order and annihilation, side by side. Kurtz was in a manic phase, oscillating between folksy charm and lethal intensity. He sermonized on the simplicity of prayer, his pistol swinging like a pendulum. When he turned his gaze on Melrose, the terrifying reality of his command style surfaced. He interrogated the cook about using a racial slur against the aliens, space niggers. It seemed like a bizarre adherence to political correctness in the middle of an apocalypse, but for Kurtz, it was about discipline. When Melrose faltered, admitting to the slip, the violence was sudden and absolute. Kurtz didn't shout. He simply fired. The bullet obliterated Melrose's foot. The shock was total. Perlmutter watched as the cook collapsed, screaming, the blood pooling on the rug. Kurtz, unfazed, transitioned instantly from violence to a calm, terrifying lecture. He pressed the hot barrel of the gun to the sobbing man's forehead, demanding silence. This moment encapsulates the true horror of Kurtz. He is not merely crazy. He is a force of calculated insanity. He uses the violence to enforce a bizarre code of conduct, no slurs, total obedience, absolute purity of mission. He declared that they would wipe out the aliens, burn their worlds, and salt their earth. But they would do so with proper language. It was a grotesque parody of morality. Underhill arrived in the aftermath, stepping over the maimed cook with the numbness of a man who has seen too much. Kurtz, switching masks again, greeted Underhill with warmth, dismissing the brutality as a necessary lesson in protocol. He sent Perlmutter away to deal with the mess, leaving the two commanders alone. Outside, Henry Devlin watched the drama unfold from behind the wire. He saw the stretcher bring out the wounded cook and felt the collective fear of the other prisoners. A portly man tried to rationalize the situation, clinging to the belief that this is America and due process would save them. Henry knew better. He possessed the cynicism of the condemned. He engaged in a dangerous game with a guard, a soldier whose mind was open to him. Henry taunted the man, pulling a dark secret about a rape from the soldier's memories. It was a reckless display of his new power, a way to assert dominance when he had none. The soldier nearly shot him, but the fear of the unknown, the sense that Henry knew too much, held him back. Henry realized then that the telepathy was a virus, a low-grade infection they all shared. But he also knew he had the virus in his blood. He was a ticking clock. Back in the trailer, the dynamic between Kurtz and Underhill settled into a grim negotiation. Kurtz began to clean Melrose's blood from the floor, a domestic act that belied the slaughter he was planning. He dropped the crazy old man act, revealing the cold, sharp intellect beneath. He admitted to playing a character, a mix of Patton and Rasputin, to keep his men on edge. He needed Underhill to believe that there was a rational plan behind the madness. Kurtz laid out the spin that would be sold to the world. The president would announce that a ship had crashed, carrying a deadly contagion called the Ripley fungus. The aliens were dead, the area quarantined. The public would be told that the detainees were being treated. But then Kurtz pivoted to the truth, the final solution. There would be no treatment. There would be no survivors. He explained that they were going to execute everyone, the civilians in the barn, the infected soldiers, even the children. He described a 4-year-old girl, innocent and sweet, who was already sprouting the alien fungus. In Kurtz's Darwinian logic, she was a biological dirty bomb. He framed the impending massacre not as murder, but as a mercy, a necessary amputation to save the human race. He justified it with the cold calculus of a man who had long ago traded his soul for the greater good. Underhill listened, trapped in the orbit of Kurtz's charisma and logic. He saw the horror of it, the mass murder of Americans by Americans, but he felt powerless to stop it. Kurtz played on Underhill's loyalty and his weariness, asking for help one last time to bring closure. It was a seduction of the soul. Underhill, feeling the weight of the inevitable, agreed. He became complicit, a bird picking scraps from the crocodile's teeth, hoping not to be eaten. As Underhill left the trailer, stepping back into the howling storm, Kurtz remained behind. The mask dropped completely. He sat alone, smoking, contemplating the man who had just left. Underhill had agreed, yes, but Kurtz sensed the hesitation, the fracture in loyalty. Underhill had let him down before by broadcasting the alien signal. In Kurtz's binary world of absolute loyalty or absolute betrayal, there were no second chances. Kurtz looked at the door and made his final, silent decision. The massacre would not just be for the prisoners, the cleansing would be total. No one would leave Gosselin's market alive. especially not Owen Underhill. The tragedy was set. The players were merely waiting for the curtain to fall on the final act of their own destruction. Chapter 14. The escape continues in the biting cold, a seamless transition from one stolen vehicle to the next, driven by a biological imperative that mimics logic but lacks humanity. Mr. Gray, wearing the stolen flesh of Gary Jones, guides the dying snowmobile into a frozen ravine. The machine has served its purpose, and like the body it carries, it is merely a tool to be discarded when its utility expires. He conceals the vehicle in a drainage pipe, a calculated move to evade aerial reconnaissance. It is a chilling reminder of the alien's tactical efficiency. He possesses the knowledge of a soldier without the burden of fear. Inside the mind, a concept that has become a terrifyingly literal geography for Jonesy, the displaced host watches. He is trapped in a mental representation of his own office, a safe room constructed from psychic debris. Jonesy realizes with a clarity that only total helplessness can provide that he hates Mr. Gray. It isn't just fear anymore. It is a visceral loathing. But as Mr. Gray departs the conscious forefront to scout for a new host, Jonesy is left alone with the ambient cloud of the alien presence, a mindless fungal sentience that guards the body like a thermostat. This moment of isolation offers a perilous opportunity. Jonesy steps out of his mental office and into the vastness of his own subconscious. In the architecture of the mind, this manifests as a gargantuan warehouse, lit by endless rows of fluorescent tubes. It is a library of the self, containing trillions of boxes, each a folded memory. Here, Stephen King's exploration of the memory palace takes a desperate turn. Jonesy isn't browsing. He is looting his own history. He knows the alien intends to go south, drawn by a compulsion linked to their childhood friend, Dudits. Acting on instinct, Jonesy locates the boxes labeled Duddits and Derry. He drags them into his office sanctuary, building a barricade of nostalgia. It is a psychological defense mechanism made manifest, literally walling himself in with his past to protect his future. He barely manages to secure the door before the presence returns. Outside in the physical world, the perspective shifts to Andy Janus, an army truck driver navigating the blinding whiteout of the storm. Janus is a man of discipline, hauling a grim cargo of dead deer and a decomposing alien corpse, unaware that he's about to become a vessel. The possession begins not with a physical attack, but with a mental whisper. Pull over. The intrusion is violent and absolute. Janus fights, his will clashing with the intruder, but the alien force is overwhelming. In a sequence of grotesque horror, Mr. Gray asserts dominance. He forces Janus's own hand to grab a ballpoint pen and drive it into his eye, piercing the brain. It is a brutal, efficient execution designed to sever the host's resistance and wipe the slate clean. The violence here serves a thematic purpose. It underscores the fragility of human autonomy when faced with a superior psychic predator. Janus dies, and his body is discarded over a guardrail, just another husk in the snow. Mr. Gray, now commandeering the army truck, returns his focus to the internal struggle. He is baffled. He finds himself standing outside Jonesy's office door in the memory warehouse, unable to enter. The door is locked. To an entity used to total assimilation, the concept of a locked portion of a mind is alien. Jonesy has utilized the psychic imprint of Dudits, no bounce, no play, to create an inviolable rule. As Mr. Gray drives the truck south, mimicking military radio protocol to pass through checkpoints, he attempts to coax Jonesy out. He finds a forgotten memory box outside the office, a yellow Scooby-Doo lunchbox belonging to Duddits. He uses it as bait, alternating between logic, threats, and a terrifyingly soothing hypnotic suggestion. "We always win," he intones, trying to lull Jonesy into surrender. But the alien is changing. By inhabiting a human vessel, Mr. Gray is becoming infected by the very biology he seeks to dominate. He feels rage, a chaotic, hot human emotion that disgusts him even as he drowns in it. When Jonesy resists the hypnosis, shouting a defiant, "Eat shit and die," from behind the door, Mr. Grey throws a tantrum, hammering the steering wheel. The line between invader and host is blurring. The cold, grey logic is being corrupted by human passion. Jonesy, shaking off the near seduction of the hypnosis, experiences a shift in his sanctuary. The office transforms. A phone rings, an impossible object in this mental construct. When he answers, he hears the voice of Beaver, his deceased friend, repeating a traumatic memory about a severed head in a ditch. It is the subconscious screaming, forcing repressed trauma to the surface. Jonesy looks out the window of his mind, but instead of the snowy present, he sees the past, the hole in the wall camp in 1978. The door of the cabin opens in the vision, and a young Beaver runs out. The narrative loop is closing. Jonesy is trapped in a box of his own making, watching the ghosts of his childhood play out the events that started it all, while his body drives inexorably south, carrying the end of the world through the blinding snow. Chapter 15. The narrative shifts now, moving between the harsh, electrified reality of the containment camp and the sepia-toned, fluid architecture of memory. We find Henry Devlin standing in the unforgiving glare of security lights, watching Owen Underhill approach through the driving snow. But before Henry can speak, before he can beg for his life or bargain for his freedom, the present moment collapses under the weight of a psychic intrusion. The telepathic bond he shares with his friends, a bond forged in childhood and cemented by the mysterious boy named Duddits, drags him back to November 1978. This is not merely a flashback, it is a shared consciousness, a collective reliving of trauma. In the memory, Henry wakes in a cabin to the smell of gasoline and burning rubber, a sensory echo of a violent accident. He isn't alone. His friends, Pete, Beaver and Jonesy, are waking up alongside him, all entangled in the same nightmare. This moment illustrates the depth of their connection. They don't just share secrets, they inhabit the same dreamscape. In this memory, they find Beaver outside in the freezing cold, kneeling beneath a maple tree, weeping uncontrollably. It's a haunting image of innocence colliding with mortality. Beaver isn't crying for himself. He's mourning the grotesque death of Richie Grenadeau, a local bully they had all seen in their shared dream. The boys rush to comfort Beaver, but the telepathic signal is too strong to ignore. They are suddenly pulled into the vision itself, standing in a marshy ditch where a car has crashed. Here, the story delves into the psychological horror that defines their lives. They see Dudits, their mentally challenged friend who acts as the fulcrum of their powers, screaming and crying. Dudits is sensitive to the psychic noise of death, and the boys realize they must soothe him to stop the psychic feedback loop. Beaver, despite his own terror, sings a lullaby to Dudits. This is a crucial character beat. Even as children, they acted as guardians, learning to manage the chaotic energies Dudits released. When the memory fades and they return to the cabin, they make a pact to never speak of it, burying the trauma deep, where it festers until this very night at the camp. Henry snaps back to the present, the snowy reality of the Blue Group containment zone reasserting itself. The transition is jarring, leaving him disoriented but armed with a weapon he didn't have before: knowledge. The alien presence, the virus, has amplified the local telepathic field. Henry realizes he can read Owen Underhill, the commanding officer on the other side of the wire. This confrontation is a pivotal moment in the lore. Henry is desperate, his life hanging by a thread, and he uses this newfound telepathy to strip Underhill bare. He speaks the names of Underhill's wife and daughter. He dives deeper, dredging up a buried memory of a moral failure in Underhill's past, involving a family named the Rapaloes, a moment where Underhill broke a plate and ran away, rather than facing a difficult situation. Henry weaponizes Underhill's shame, accusing him of being the same coward now that he was then. Underhill, however, doesn't shoot. He listens. This suggests that beneath the military conditioning, Underhill is looking for a reason to stop the machine he helps operate. Henry reveals the terrifying endgame. The military leader, Kurtz, plans to execute everyone in the barn and burn the evidence. It's a biological cleansing, a massacre disguised as containment. Henry tries to run but collapses in the snow, his body weakened by the alien infection growing inside him. But his words have struck a nerve. Underhill stops. The scene shifts to a storage shed where Henry seeks shelter. Here we see the practical effects of the alien infection, known as the virus or Ripley. The shed is occupied by other prisoners, terrified and smoking pot to numb the fear. Henry, needing privacy to negotiate with Underhill, plays on their paranoia. He reveals the fungal growth on his own leg, Ripley Prime, and warns them that he is contagious. The prisoners flee, leaving Henry alone in the dark. Underhill arrives outside the window, and what follows is a critical exposition of the alien nature, delivered through a mix of whispered dialogue and telepathic projection. Henry deconstructs the invasion. He explains that the shitweasels, the parasitic eels, are not a master race. They are a biological error. They are a cancer that eats the host and eventually dies. The red fungus, the virus, is failing to adapt to the Earth's environment, likely due to the cold, though Henry suspects the failure is more fundamental. The aliens are not conquering, they are dying. This recontextualizes the entire threat. The Greys arrived on a suicide mission, unable to conceptualize their own failure. But there is one exception, one variable that changes everything: Gary Jones. Henry explains that Jonesy is Typhoid Mary. Because of their childhood exposure to Duddits, a natural telepath who altered their brain chemistry, Jonesy is different. He is the perfect carrier, the one host who might allow the alien biological code to mutate and survive. Henry convinces Underhill that slaughtering the innocent people in the barn is pointless because the true threat, Jonesy, has already left the quarantine zone. Underhill is skeptical, but the telepathy proves it. Henry forces a mental image into Underhill's mind, demonstrating the power that Duddits unlocked in them. Underhill, realizing that the containment has already failed and that his superior officer is planning a genocide for nothing, faces a moral crossroads. The Kurtz line, the absolute obedience to the insane commander, must be broken. They begin to formulate a plan. Underhill suggests a simple escape. He can cut the power, create a diversion, and smuggle Henry out in a snowcat to chase after Jonesy. It's a pragmatic military solution. Acceptable losses is the phrase he projects to Henry regarding the hundreds of civilians trapped in the barn. But Henry Devlin refuses. In a moment of profound redemption, the man who was contemplating suicide just hours ago finds a reason to fight. He rejects the idea of leaving the others to burn. He proposes a counterplan, one that is frantic and dangerous but morally necessary. They will not just run, they will create a massive diversion to save the prisoners. By forcing Kurtz to deal with a mass breakout and the potential PR nightmare of a massacre on American soil, they can buy the prisoners time and cover their own escape. Owen Underhill, the professional eraser, the man who cleans up the government's messes, finally decides to stop running from his own conscience. He agrees to Henry's terms. They make a deal. Henry provides the house, the plan, and Underhill will furnish it, execute the tactics. As the chapter closes, the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. They are no longer prisoner and guard. They are conspirators bonded by telepathy and a desperate need for atonement. They prepare to unleash chaos on the camp, not just to save the world from the alien threat escaping with Jonesy, but to save their own souls from the fire that Kurtz intends to light. The stage is set for a breakout, and the quiet dread of the snowstorm is about to be shattered. Chapter 16. The narrative descends into the stifling heat of memory, trapping us in a moment from 1978 that feels less like nostalgia and more like an inescapable cage. We find Jonesy inside Goslin's market, sweating through a hallucination so vivid it burns. This is the sweltering friction of the hive mind, where the temperature is being cranked up by an alien intruder, but for Jonesy, it manifests as a distortion of his childhood. He is 14 again, flanked by Beaver, Pete and Henry, huddled around a payphone. The air is thick with the scent of pickle brine, floor oil, and the impending doom of adolescence. In this fever dream they are calling Duddits. The boys are performing their ritual of asking permission, but the atmosphere is curdled. The operator is hostile, the locals are suspicious, and the heat is unbearable, a physical manifestation of the alien Mr. Grey, taking control of Jonesy's biological functions in the real world. When Duddits comes on the line, his distress is palpable. His wails pierce the receiver, a psychic alarm bell ringing across decades. As the phone is passed around, a dark epiphany strikes Jonesy. He realizes that their memories are not innocent. In the hidden corners of their shared past, they didn't just fear the local bully, Richie Grenado, they preemptively struck him. The dream reveals the guilt they've suppressed, the violence inherent in their bond. The dream shifts gears into a nightmare warning. Duddits isn't just crying, he is broadcasting a frantic signal. Don't go out. Mr. Grey! The temporal lines blur. Jonesy looks through the dusty window of the market and sees not the past but the present horror, a grey, naked entity standing by a gas pump. It is the virus, the alien infection staring back at him. The memory fractures, the colour draining away until only the oppressive heat and the black receiver remain. Jonesy wakes, but not to freedom. He snaps into consciousness within the storehouse of his own mind, visualized as the office at Tracker Brothers' old trucking depot. This is the mental construct where his consciousness has retreated while Mr. Grey pilots his physical body. The room is a furnace. Mr. Grey, controlling the biological thermostat, is trying to smoke Jonesy out, pushing the body's temperature to lethal heights. It is a siege of the mind. Jonesy, however, realizes that this is his mind palace. If Mr. Grey can manipulate the body, Jonesy can manipulate the architecture of his thoughts. In a brilliant display of psychological warfare, he visualizes his study from home, specifically the thermostat. He wills it into existence on the office wall. It is a battle of will over biology. Jonesy dials the mental temperature down, and the scorching heat recedes, replaced by a cool breeze. He has proven that while the alien drives the car, the human still owns the road. Through the window of this mental office, Jonesy acts as a voyeur to his own actions. He watches Mr. Grey operating his stolen vessel, a Dodge Ram pickup now, the military truck abandoned. Beside him sits Lad, a border collie, an innocent witness to this cosmic carjacking. Jonesy discovers he can overlay his vision with Mr. Grey's, seeing the snowy reality of the turnpike. They are heading into Derry. This journey is fueled by Mr. Grey's access to Jonesy's memories. But memories are tricky, subjective things. They lack the context of time. Mr. Grey is hunting for the Derry standpipe, a massive water tower that dominates Jonesy's childhood recollections. He navigates the truck up the treacherous, snow-choked incline of Carter Street, expecting to find the perfect dispersal point for the alien contagion. What follows is a moment of dark comedy and profound lore significance. The truck crests the hill, the wind howling like a banshee, only to find empty space. Mr. Grey stumbles out of the truck, Jonesy's stolen limbs flailing in the snow, screaming into the storm. Where is it? The standpipe is gone. Jonesy, safe in his mental bunker, revels in the alien's confusion. He knows what the alien does not. The standpipe was destroyed in the catastrophic storm of 1985. This is a crucial intersection with the wider Stephen King universe. Mr. Gray finds a stone pedestal where the tower once stood, buried in snow. The plaque is dedicated to the victims of that storm and signed by the Losers Club. But the true chilling detail is the graffiti sprayed across the memorial in jagged red letters. Pennywise lives. It is a stark reminder that in Derry, evil is cyclical, and the alien infestation is just the latest darkness to befall this cursed town. Defeated by the passage of time, Mr. Gray retreats to the truck. The entity is shivering, its stolen body failing under the stress of the cold and the emotional tantrum. Jonesy seizes the opportunity to negotiate. He speaks through the locked door of his mind, offering information in exchange for food. The alien is starving, burning through Jonesy's caloric reserves. They strike a deal. Breakfast at a 24-hour truck stop for the location of the water supply. It is an uneasy truce between the parasite and the host, bound by mutual survival. While Jonesy battles for control of his soul, the narrative pivots to the psychic fallout reaching Roberta Cavill's home. It is past 1 a.m, but the house is awake with sorrow. Duddits is singing. Roberta finds her son fully dressed in his corduroys and down vest, sitting by the window, staring into the blizzard. The connection between Duddits and the others, the Dreamcatcher, is vibrating with death. Duddits knows. He wails that Beaver is dead, that Pete is dead. For Roberta, this is a horror movie come to life. She is terrified that a knock at the door will reveal the reanimated corpses of her son's childhood friends. But Duddits isn't looking for ghosts. He is clutching his lunchbox, his eyes bright with a heartbreaking expectancy. He is singing the Scooby-Doo theme song, waiting for the mystery machine to arrive. He believes his friends are coming to pick him up. The tragedy here is twofold. Duddits senses they are coming, but he cannot comprehend the monstrous form in which they will arrive. He is a beacon of pure, damaged innocence, signaling into the dark, unaware that the signal has been answered by a predator wearing his best friend's face. Back in the truck, Mr. Gray has found a new direction. He has mined Jonesy's mind for the next logical target. The truck rolls down from the empty hill, leaving the memorial to the Losers Club behind in the swirling snow, heading south toward the water supply, toward the end of the world. Chapter 17. The cold reality of the Blue Boy base is a place where sleep offers the only escape, yet it is exactly where Owen Underhill cannot allow Henry Devlin to remain. Owen, a man rapidly losing patience and time, finds that physical shouting is useless against Henry's exhaustion. Instead, he utilizes the very affliction that plagues them, the telepathic bond created by the alien virus. It is a dark irony of this contagion that as the reddish-gold fungus claims the body, plugging ears and sealing fingers, it opens the mind to a chorus of voices. Owen can hear his fellow soldiers, the pilots of the surviving gunships, desperately masking their own infections within their winter gear, terrified and leaderless. Owen reaches into Henry's mind, pulling him from a nostalgic dream of childhood baseball and phantom girls. It is a necessary cruelty. The dream world is soft and safe, but the waking world demands action. When Henry finally jolts awake in the shed, disoriented by the temporal whiplash of shifting from a teenage memory to a 30-something nightmare, he is greeted by Owen's mental projection. It is a command to move, fueled by the grim necessity that defines this entire ordeal. The physical toll is immense. Henry is stiff, aging rapidly under the stress of the alien moss itching beneath his skin. But Owen, ever the pragmatic soldier, has a solution stolen from the infirmary. He tosses a steel box through the shed window, shattering the glass. Inside are military-grade stimulants, pills so potent they make standard narcotics look like candy. This is the jagged edge of survival. They are medicating themselves not to heal, but to function just long enough to die trying. Before they can proceed, however, the horror of their situation crystallizes in a shared psychic vision. Through the telepathic line, both Owen and Henry witness the suicide of two fellow soldiers, Kavanaugh and Belson. These men, hiding in a trailer and overwhelmed by the aggressive growth of the alien fungus, choose a quick exit over the slow transformation. It is a stark, brutal reminder of the hopelessness permeating the camp. The telepathy forces Henry and Owen to experience the very moment of death, a shared trauma that stiffens their resolve. If they are going to go out, it won't be like that. The stimulants hit Henry's system with violent efficiency, stripping away the fatigue and replacing it with a crystalline, manic energy. It's an artificial resurrection. Owen sketches the plan. He will wait at the southwest corner of the compound with a snowcat. Henry has 30 minutes to ignite a distraction in the barn, where the internees are being held. If he fails, Owen leaves alone. It is a cold calculus, but Underhill is a man of logistics, not sentiment. Before they part, Owen demands a verbal confirmation of their motivation. He needs to hear the word aloud, perhaps to anchor himself in a reality that feels increasingly like a hallucination. Henry gives it to him. They are going to be heroes, not out of nobility, but because every other option leads to the grave. It is heroism born of cornered desperation. Meanwhile, in the plush command center of the Winnebago, Kurtz awakes. He's a study in controlled madness, a man who refers to his own insanity as being unsane, a functional, weaponized psychosis. He checks his body for the infection with obsessive precision, relieved to find himself clean. More importantly, the telepathy is gone from his head. To a man like Kurtz, who values absolute control and hierarchy, the mental intrusion of the alien hive mind was a violation akin to assault. But silence in Kurtz's head does not mean peace. His finely honed survival instincts, the hunch-ola that has kept him alive through decades of covert warfare, are screaming. He senses the storm coming before it breaks. He alerts his second-in-command, Freddie Johnson, ordering the elite Imperial Valley unit to prepare. Kurtz realizes that the chaos is being orchestrated, and he knows with the intuition of a betrayed father figure that Owen Underhill is the architect. Henry enters the barn, which has been converted into a holding pen. It is a surreal tableau, a place that smells of hay, manure, and impending death, yet populated by people in expensive winter gear, looking like a catalogue shoot gone horribly wrong. These are not refugees in a war-torn nation. They are Americans who still cannot believe their government intends to incinerate them. Henry realizes he cannot save them one by one. He needs to weaponize their fear. He locates the strong telepaths among the prisoners, Charles, Marcia, and Bill, and physically links with them. It is a seance of panic. Using their combined mental strength as an amplifier, Henry projects a terrifying, visceral hallucination into the minds of everyone in the barn. He shows them the future that awaits them: soldiers, napalm, fire, and death. He shows them their children burning. It is psychological manipulation of the highest order. He bypasses their logic and strikes directly at their survival instinct. He feeds them a single command, chanting it until it becomes a psychic virus more contagious than the virus itself. Now. The effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. The collective mind of the prisoners snaps. The barn doors are shattered not by mechanical force, but by the sheer weight of 300 terrified souls moving as one organism. The riot begins. Outside, the sentries are caught completely off guard. In the back of the store, soldiers playing poker, some concealing their own infections, are suddenly overrun. The psychological barrier between the guards and the guarded dissolves in violence. Gene Cambry, an infected soldier who has been hiding his condition, finds himself caught in the stampede. He hears the chant of "now" ripping through his mind. In the chaos, the social order of the military hierarchy collapses. Soldiers turn on each other, the infected killing the immune, or simply fleeing the mental onslaught. The burning stove tips over, igniting the store, and the distraction Henry promised transforms into an inferno. Henry sprints across the snow-swept paddock, the chemicals in his blood warring with his exhaustion. He is exposed, terrified, running toward a salvation that might not be there. But Owen Underhill is a man of his word. The lights of the snowcat flash, and Henry scrambles aboard just as the world behind him dissolves into fire and noise. Owen has sabotaged the generators, plunging parts of the camp into darkness, but they are not out of range yet. As they speed toward the perimeter, they come under fire. Kurtz has emerged from his Winnebago. Even amidst the collapse of his operation, the grey-haired commander is a terrifying force of nature. He stands in the snow, firing with preternatural accuracy, bullets banging off the snowcat's armor. Owen laughs, a manic sound, recognizing the lethal competence of his former mentor. To stop the pursuit, Owen triggers the final part of his plan, detonating the thermite charges he planted on the remaining generators. The explosions rip through the night, creating a wall of fire and confusion that swallows the camp. For a moment, the pursuit is blinded. Back in the wreckage of the compound, Kurtz ceases fire. The goddamn telepathy may be gone, but the betrayal burns brighter than the flames consuming the barn. He rallies Freddie Johnson, framing the situation in biblical terms. Owen is Judas, and they are the righteous vengeance. Kurtz's madness shifts gears. He abandons the military protocol of containment for a primal hunt. He orders his elite unit to switch to search and destroy, a cannibalistic directive to wipe out everyone else while he and Freddie hunt down Underhill. It is no longer a mission. It is a blood feud. In the snowcat, hurtling southward toward the highway, the adrenaline begins to fade for Henry. They are alive, but the stakes have shifted. Owen Underhill drives with the reckless abandon of a man who has burned his bridges, his career, and his past. They are headed for Derry, Maine, to find Jonesy, the friend whose body has been usurped by the alien intelligence Mr. Gray. As the vehicle tears through the snow, Owen asks Henry to define them one last time. He needs to hear it. He needs the label to justify the treason. Henry obliges, his voice heavy with sleep. They are heroes. It is a word that usually implies glory, but here in the dark cabin of a stolen machine, it simply means they are the only ones left to carry the burden. Henry closes his eyes, drifting into sleep, leaving the nightmare of the camp behind for the nightmare that waits ahead. Chapter 18. The chase begins in the heart of a blinding New England blizzard, a whiteout that erases the world and leaves only the struggle for survival. We find Jonesy, or rather, the entity wearing Jonesy like a winter coat, navigating a stolen Ram pickup through the storm. The dashboard clock is broken, flashing a meaningless midnight loop, a fitting symbol for a situation where time has lost its normal structure. Mr. Gray, the alien consciousness now at the wheel, is pushing the vehicle toward a beacon in the gloom, the green glow of Dysart's truck stop. Jonesy, trapped within the mental architecture of his own mind, specifically an office with a locked door, watches with a mixture of terror and dark humor. He knows the truck is losing the battle against the drifts. But Mr. Gray possesses a terrifying competence. Unlike a panicked human, the alien reacts to skids with mathematical precision, correcting the slide without a spike in heart rate. It is a chilling juxtaposition, the biological machinery of a human body operated by a pilot who feels no fear, only cold calculation. As they pull into the truck stop, a place Jonesy and his friends historically mocked as dry farts, we see the alien learning. Mr. Gray is not just piloting the body, he is absorbing the host's memories and reflexes. He attempts a smile, and the sensation is grotesque to Jonesy, a ghost trying to remember the mechanics of joy. Mr. Gray laughs, a staccato, mechanical sound, as he begins to understand the concept of humor, however vaguely. This mimicry is dangerous. If the parasite learns to pass as human, the threat level escalates from biological containment to infiltration. Meanwhile, miles away in the snow, Henry Devlin and Owen Underhill are executing a desperate maneuver of their own. Henry, infected by the telepathic fungus known as the virus, has tapped into a newfound godlike perception. He peers into the darkness and connects with the minds of 4 young soldiers guarding a Humvee. This isn't just mind reading. It is a higher dimensional viewing, seeing through multiple sets of eyes simultaneously. It creates a dizzying, nausea-inducing perspective that transcends human biology. Henry acts as a conduit, projecting a mental image of Colonel Kurtz to terrify the young soldiers into abandoning their post. It works. The soldiers, thinking they've been ordered out by their terrifying commander, march into the snow, leaving the Humvee for Henry and Owen. This moment underscores a terrifying reality of the contagion. The telepathy is seductive. It offers power and connection, even as the fungus slowly consumes the host. Henry is exhausted, his body failing, but his mind is expanding, capable of feats that defy physics. As Henry and Owen flee south in the stolen Humvee, the narrative shifts back to the hunter. Abraham Kurtz, the madness at the center of this operation, is far from defeated. Stripped of his massive command, reduced to a single vehicle, he remains dangerous. He is no longer telepathic. The connection has left him, but his intuition is sharp and his brutality is intact. At a burning barn, his subordinates bring him 2 prisoners, Gene Cambry, a black soldier infected and now telepathic, and Archie Perlmutter, a flatulent, terrified man also harboring the alien growth. Kurtz's behavior here is a study in high-functioning psychosis. He treats the capture like a card game, flipping playing cards into a hat while discussing the fate of these men. He presses them into service as bloodhounds. He needs their telepathy to track Owen and Henry. It is a deal with the devil. Serve the man who wants to kill you, or die immediately. Cambry and Perlmutter, suffused with the alien presence, can sense the truth in Kurtz's mind. He plans to execute them eventually anyway. But survival instinct drives them into the Humvee. Back at the truck stop, the scene shifts to pure sensory horror. Mr. Gray enters the diner, guided by Jonesy's memories of social interaction. He orders bacon and eggs, a culinary experience that creates an explosion of sensation for the alien. To Mr. Gray, the taste of bacon is the taste of flesh. He devours it with a ravenous, vampiric intensity, overwhelmed by the pleasures of the physical world. Jonesy, watching from his mental prison, realizes that the alien is vulnerable to the body's biological imperatives. Jonesy decides to fight back, not with force, but with biology. He encourages Mr. Gray's gluttony, knowing that the combination of grease and sugar will wreak havoc on a digestive system the alien doesn't fully understand. It's a subtle form of sabotage. When the inevitable cramps hit, Jonesy offers helpful advice, guiding Mr. Gray to the restroom. This mundane distraction buys Jonesy a split second of control. He seizes the telephone on the desk in his mind's office, a metaphysical representation of reaching out, and broadcasts a telepathic signal. The signal reaches Henry Devlin, who is sleeping in the passenger seat of the fleeing Humvee. This contact triggers a vivid, lucid dream, pulling us back to the foundational moment of the law, 1982. The backstory is crucial, for it explains the Dreamcatcher metaphor that binds these men. In the dream, we see the 4 friends, Jonesy, Henry, Pete, and Beaver, on the verge of high school graduation. They are young, alive, and unaware of the cosmic horror awaiting them decades later. The dream centers on a missing child, Josie Rinkenhauer, and their friend Duddits Cavell. Duddits, a boy with Down syndrome, is the anchor of their circle. The others have always sensed Duddits was special, but on this day, the true extent of his power is revealed. They gather at Strawford Park, standing in a circle holding hands with Duddits. This is the formation of the Dreamcatcher. As they connect, Duddits becomes a lens, focusing their disparate minds into a single piercing beam of psychic awareness. They aren't just friends, they become a hive mind, sharing a singular vision. Through Duddits, they see the line, a psychic trail left by the missing girl. This flashback recontextualizes everything happening in the present. The telepathy Henry and Jonesy are using now isn't just a side effect of the alien fungus. It is a reawakening of the neural pathways Duddits opened in them years ago. The alien infection has simply greased the grooves that were already there. In the memory, the boys follow the line to the sewers beneath Derry. They crawl into the filth, a literal descent into the underworld to rescue the girl. It is a moment of pure heroism, but it seals their fate. By using Duddits to see the line, they permanently altered their own brain chemistry. They became open doors. This explains why Jonesy was the perfect host for Mr. Grey. He had been prepared for this occupation since 1982. Back in the present, the dream is shattered by the ringing of a phone in the Humvee. It's a psychic projection, Jonesy's voice ringing through the ether. Henry answers using a pistol as a receiver, a hallucination birthed from the strength of the connection. Jonesy confirms he is alive, but the news is grim. Mr. Grey plans to ambush a state trooper to acquire a vehicle with a clean radio and authority. The stakes have shifted. Mr. Grey isn't just running. He is planning to spread the infection. The complexity of the situation deepens as Owen Underhill listens to Henry. Owen, a man of military logic, is forced to accept a reality where thoughts can make phone calls and friendship spans dimensions. He realizes that chasing Jonesy is necessary not to save him, but to stop the potential extinction of the human race. Suddenly the radio crackles. It's Kurtz. The conversation that follows is a chilling portrait of a worldview that cannot bend. Kurtz plays the role of the benevolent commander, urging Owen to pull over and return to the fold. But the mask slips when he tells the story of the rabid raccoon. In Kurtz's parable, a farmer poisons his own wells to spite a neighbor he believes is persecuting him. It is a confession of his own scorched earth philosophy. If the system is infected, destroy the system. Owen tries to reason with him. He explains the biological reality. The aliens cannot survive in the cold ecosystem. The threat is dying out on its own, and Mr. Grey is the only outlier because of Jonesy's unique physiology. He tells Kurtz that the slaughter is redundant. In the back of Kurtz's Humvee, the telepathic prisoner Cambry confirms this. He screams that Owen is telling the truth, that he can read the sincerity in his mind. But truth is fatal to a paranoid system. Kurtz, faced with evidence that contradicts his mission, reacts with reflex rather than reason. He draws his weapon and executes Cambry mid-sentence. The sudden violence silences the vehicle. It is the final severance of sanity. Kurtz is no longer a soldier conducting a containment operation. He is a rogue element, a crazy man, as Perlmutter calls him. With Cambry dead, Perlmutter, the flatulent, terrified accountant, becomes the sole tracking mechanism. Kurtz, unfazed by the murder he just committed, calmly orders the pursuit to continue. The chapter closes on this grim tableau. The chase is on, fueled by madness on one side and desperation on the other. Between them lies the memory of Duddits and the Dreamcatcher, the only force capable of navigating the storm that threatens to consume them all. The line has been drawn, and they are all following it into the dark. Chapter 19. The chase continues. For the entity known as Mr. Grey, the sensory overload of human existence is a buffet of raw feeling. He revels in the sharp spikes of emotion and the heavy satisfaction of food, yet the biological realities of Jonesy's body, specifically the expulsion of waste, disgust him. In a bathroom stall at a desolate rest stop, the alien presence inhabits the human vessel with an uneasy trembling, rejecting the basic hygiene Jonesy's mind begs him to perform. It is a stark reminder of the incompatibility between the ethereal invader and the crude, wet machinery of the human form. When a state trooper enters the restroom, a lethal friction sparks. The officer, mundane and chatty, notices the unzipped fly and makes small talk about the storm and the rumors of lights in the sky. Jonesy, watching helplessly from the passenger seat of his own consciousness, feels a prickle of despair. He knows the script before it is written. The trooper's curiosity is his death sentence. Mr. Gray strikes not with a weapon, but with the sheer, crushing weight of his psychic will. He forces the trooper into a gruesome, compelled suicide against the tiled wall. As the blood flows, Jonesy finds himself in a macabre state of dissociation. He begins to laugh. It is a reaction born of horror, but also of a strange, dark utility. Mr. Gray, you see, has been mining Jonesy's mind. He has bypassed the personal memories and tapped into Jonesy's vast knowledge of pop culture, horror movies, suspense novels, the disposal techniques of fictional serial killers. Jonesy is a connoisseur of the macabre, and now that appreciation for fiction is being weaponized in reality. As Mr. Gray cleans the scene and hides the body behind a snow-covered dumpster, Jonesy realizes that the alien has discovered a taste for something far more potent than bacon or rage. Mr. Gray has discovered the thrill of murder. This sequence highlights a terrifying symbiosis. Jonesy is not pulling the trigger, but his subconscious is providing the manual. The separation between the innocent dreamer and the monster is blurring, the boundaries of identity eroding under the flood of endorphins that violence releases. Outside, the chase is evolving. Mr. Gray, now armed with the trooper's gun and driving the cruiser, heads south. He can sense the others, Henry and the soldier, Owen Underhill. He feels their pursuit, but curiously, he realizes their focus has shifted. They are stopping in Derry. This confuses the alien logic, but it suits his purposes perfectly. It buys him time to switch vehicles again, this time aiming for a snowplow, a machine capable of carving through the storm that shields him. 70 miles behind, Henry Devlin and Owen Underhill are indeed making a detour, one driven by a force deeper than tactical logic. Henry is seeing through the eyes of the past, reliving the moment the four childhood friends used Duddits to find the missing girl, Josie Rinkenhauer. In the vision, the memory is pure, the triumph of their bond, the way Duddits, their dreamcatcher, unified them to do good. But as Henry snaps back to the present, guiding Owen toward Duddits' house on the west side of Derry, the nostalgia curdles into cynicism. The grandiosity of their psychic connection feels wasted, a quantum miracle used for small neighborhood errands. Now, facing the end of the world, Henry feels the weight of their abandonment of Duddits. They grew up, moved on, and left their magic behind. The tension between Henry and Owen in the Humvee is palpable. They are two men at the end of their ropes, trading insults that cut to the bone. They strip away the polite veneers of society, culminating in a raw, nihilistic exchange of profanity that strangely bonds them. They are dead men walking, and in that acceptance, they find a singular focus. Get to Duddits, then stop the monster. When they arrive at 41 Dearborn Street, the reunion is not the triumphant moment of the past. It is a collision with the harsh reality of mortality. Roberta Cavell, Duddits' mother, is terrified, viewing Henry and Owen as spectres of death come to claim her son, and Duddits himself. The shock of his appearance is a physical blow to Henry. The strong, vibrant boy of memory is gone, replaced by a gaunt, leukemia-ridden man. The Dreamcatcher is fraying, yet the spark remains. Duddits greets Henry with undiluted joy, unaware or unconcerned by his own decay. Roberta reveals the tragedy. Duddits has been dying for months, and they have been fighting a losing battle against time. This revelation reframes the entire narrative for Henry. The guilt of absence weighs heavy, but the immediate crisis overrides it. Owen, the soldier, has to be the one to break the hard truth to Roberta. They need Duddits. The fate of the world may well hang on the dying man's faded psychic resonance. Meanwhile, the chaotic pursuit of Abraham Kurtz continues. Kurtz, the embodiment of military insanity, is tracking them with his own grotesque compass, Archie Perlmutter. Perlmutter is in agony, his body a host to the parasitic Ripley fungus. His suffering is Kurtz's navigational data. The dynamic in the Humvee is a dark reflection of the bond between Henry and Duddits, where one is based on love and shared history, the other is based on domination and biological horror. Kurtz bullies his team forward, coercing a snowplow driver to clear their path, unfazed by the moral collapse of his mission. He is a man who has lost his command but found his purpose in the hunt. We see a brief glimpse of the wider world collapsing as the Imperial Valleys, the military cleanup crews, are ambushed and massacred by survivalists and panicked civilians. The quarantine has failed. The illusion of control is shattered. The structure of society is dissolving into anarchy, leaving our protagonists isolated in their personal struggles within the storm. Back inside the mind of Jonesy, the situation has become a claustrophobic nightmare. Mr. Gray has walled him off. The office of his mind, once a sanctuary, is now a cell with steel shutters blocking his view. Jonesy tries to conjure a fax machine to communicate, a desperate attempt to use his imagination to breach the wall, but Mr. Gray mocks him. "Give up, come out," is scrawled across the shutters. Jonesy is blind, sensing the outside world only through the rumble of the stolen snowplow. He is the ghost in his own machine, trapped in a metaphorical basement while a monster drives the house. The narrative pivots back to the emotional core in Derry. Roberta Cavell makes the impossible choice. She packs Duddits' lunchbox, a heartbreaking symbol of his eternal childhood, and hands over his medication. She realizes that this is not a kidnapping, but a departure. Duddits wants to go. He is aware in his fragmented non-linear perception of time that this is his role. He brings his own small Dreamcatcher, a twin to the one at the cabin. The tragedy here is profound. A mother sending her dying son out into a blizzard to save a world that largely ignored him. As they flee Derry, bouncing the Humvee off snowbanks, Duddits drops a cryptic piece of intelligence. He senses the enemy. "Jonesy wants war," he says. But as Henry probes deeper, correcting the interpretation, the truth shifts. It isn't war, it's water. Jonesy wants water. This realization strikes Henry just as the connection fades. Duddits is their radar, but his signal is weak. Kurtz, relentlessly closing the gap, hits a snag, a jackknifed tractor trailer. The delay sends him into a fury, but his lethal intuition remains sharp. He learns from the suffering Perlmutter that the military has locked down the entire region, turning the Jefferson Tract into a police state. But it's too late. The infection is moving. Kurtz decides to let the targets run, confident that the improving weather will allow him to close the kill box soon enough. He naps, a predator resting before the final strike. In the silence of his mental prison, Jonesy stops banging on the walls and starts thinking. He channels his inner detective, pushing past the panic. Why is Mr. Gray heading south? The standpipe in Derry, the site of a childhood trial, is gone, destroyed years ago. The local water supply is inaccessible. Jonesy realizes Mr. Gray isn't just fleeing, he is hunting. The alien has the dog, lad. The dog is infected, a carrier of the virus, a biological time bomb. And Mr. Gray knows what Jonesy knows. He knows the geography of the Northeast. He knows about the massive reservoirs that feed the cities. The pieces click together with terrifying clarity. Mr. Gray is driving the snowplow toward the Quabbin Reservoir. He intends to introduce the infected dog to the water supply of millions. The scope of the threat shifts instantly from a localized survival story to a potential extinction event. The chase is no longer about catching a friend. It is about stopping a plague. Jonesy, trapped in the dark, realizes that he is the map the monster is using to end the world. Chapter 20. The chase moves southward, shedding the pristine, snow-choked isolation of the Maine woods for the slushy reality of the turnpike. We join Mr. Gray, currently piloting the stolen snowplow, as he navigates a world that is becoming increasingly warmer and more populated. This transition marks a shift in the entity's experience. The physical vessel he inhabits, Jonesy's body, is growing weary. Gray finds himself both disgusted and fascinated by the human condition. Jonesy's muscles ache and his stamina is failing, a testament to a life spent in academia rather than physical labor. To an entity composed of pure efficiency and imperative, this frailty is baffling. Yet the trade-off is the sensory explosion of Earth. The simple, greasy pleasure of bacon has become a fixation for the alien, a tether to the very biology he plans to destroy. Inside the plough, the situation is far grimier. The dog, Lad, lies amidst trash on the floor, his belly distended and grotesque. He is incubating a Byram, one of the shit weasels, and Mr. Gray has established a psychic link with the parasite growing inside the animal. This is a crucial piece of lore. The entity isn't just a passenger in Jonesy. He is a conductor of a hive mind, regulating the gestation of the creature inside the dog, just as he monitors the others behind him. But the signal is fading. Henry and Owen have gone silent, and the connection to the group further back, Kurtz's team, is thinning, leaving only a clear line to the unfortunate Perlmutter. Gray pulls into a rest area, a mundane island of fast food and asphalt. He needs to shed the conspicuous plough. Here, we see the terrifying interplay between Jonesy and his captor. Jonesy, locked in his mental office, tries to taunt Gray, suggesting he abandon the mission to simply enjoy the hedonistic delights of human life, like bacon. It's a desperate psychological ploy, trying to erode the alien's singular purpose with the temptation of pleasure. But the biological imperative to seed the planet is unbreakable. Gray ignores the taunts, locates a young cook named Butch taking out the trash, and effortlessly hijacks the man's mind. In a chilling display of efficiency, Gray steals Butch's mother's Subaru, leaving the young man in a fugue state, unaware he has just aided the potential end of the world. While the alien feasts on barbecue chips and drives south, Henry is trapped in a dream of the past. He is back in 1981 at the Derry Days Parade. It is a memory of innocence and magic, featuring a stilt-walking cowboy and the gang, Beaver, Pete, Jonesy, and Duddits, united under a sky of fireworks. It serves as a poignant counterweight to the present horror, reminding us of the bond that anchors the story. But the dream is shattered by Owen Underhill shaking him awake. The reality is the Humvee, the smell of sickness, and the sound of Duddits coughing. Duddits is deteriorating rapidly. The leukemia is one thing, but the strain of the psychic hunt is another. However, there is a strange turn of events. The alien fungus, the virus, which had begun to infect Henry and Owen, is dying. They are coughing out white fluff, dead spores. This suggests that without the ideal conditions of the deep woods or a specific host, the Red Plague struggles to survive in the open. Duddits, despite his frailty, remains their compass. He swallows pills and drinks chocolate milk, his body failing but his mind locked onto the line. He is tracking Mr. Gray, seeing a psychic trail that others cannot. It's a testament to Duddits' role as the true anchor of this circle. He is the lens through which the invasion is perceived. On the radio, chaos reigns. Lonesome Dave, a frantic DJ, is broadcasting rumors of interstellar plague and death rays, fueling the panic. But the team in the Humvee has a more immediate concern, catching the Subaru. Duddits suddenly directs them into the same rest area Gray just left. He senses the vehicle switch. The psychic trace is so specific that Duddits knows Gray has stole a car. Henry realizes the gravity of the situation. Gray isn't just running, he has a destination. Further back, the hunter becomes the hunted in his own mind. Kurtz, the mad military commander, wakes from a nightmare where his subordinate, Owen, infects him. It's a glimpse into Kurtz's unraveling psyche, a mix of paranoia and a twisted sense of betrayal. He relies on Perlmutter, who is in agonizing condition, his stomach swelling with a growing alien larva. Pearlie has become a living radio receiver. Because the dog Lad is also incubating a Byram, Pearlie can hear the dog's thoughts. It is a grotesque daisy chain of telepathy. The alien in Pearlie listening to the alien in the dog, which is listening to Mr. Grey. Through this connection, they learn Grey is heading past Portland, bypassing the city to avoid traffic. Kurtz, fueled by madness and efficiency, orders the pursuit to speed up. The narrative widens to show the macroscopic view. The President of the United States, referred to as the Florida President, delivers a national address. It is a masterclass in political containment. He admits to a virus but claims it is contained and non-hostile, a fungal growth. It's a lie designed to quell the panic, and it works. People stop fleeing, the roads clear. This creates a deeply ironic situation. The calm allows the true threats, Grey, Henry, and Kurtz, to move faster toward the endgame. The apocalypse is proceeding efficiently because the government convinced everyone it wasn't happening. By late morning, the three vehicles are hurtling through New England. Grey crosses into Massachusetts, moving from Interstate 495 to the Mass Pike. Jonesy, trapped within his own mind, realizes where they are going. Mr. Grey is mining Jonesy's memories for navigation, specifically heading toward the Quabbin Reservoir. We enter the final, claustrophobic sequence of the chapter inside Jonesy's mind. He is pacing his mental office, counting steps to keep from breaking down. He realizes Grey isn't just driving randomly. He is targeting a specific memory. Jonesy recalls a summer trip to the Windsor Dam and a story about a Russian woman. The lore here turns tragic and macabre. In 1995, a disoriented Russian woman named Elena traveled to the reservoir. She left a trail of discarded clothes, walking through the wilderness until she reached Shaft 12, the intake shaft that feeds water to Boston by gravity. In a final, sorrowful act, she moved the heavy iron cover and slipped into the darkness of the water. It was a suicide, but to Mr. Grey, it is a blueprint. Jonesy realizes the terrifying efficiency of the plan. Grey doesn't need to infect every person individually. He intends to replicate the Russian woman's journey. He plans to take the dog, Lad, now a biological bomb filled with the alien virus, and drop him into Shaft 12. The gravity feed would carry the contagion directly into the drinking water of Boston, infecting millions in a single stroke. The chapter ends with this chilling realization. The chase is not just about catching a car. It is a race to prevent a mass poisoning that utilizes the infrastructure of civilization against itself. The memory of a lonely suicide has been weaponized into a strategy for extinction. The horror of the situation often hides in the mundane. As the final pieces of the catastrophe move into place, we are reminded of the terrifying delivery system for the alien plague: simple tap water. The local wisdom, delivered by an old mail carrier named Mr. Beckwith, suggests that the people of Boston will be ingesting the alien spores, the virus, by Valentine's Day. It is a chilling juxtaposition, a holiday of love, serving as the date for mass biological invasion. In Massachusetts, the colloquialisms remain the same, grounding this apocalyptic threat in the gritty reality of New England life. Trapped within the mental construct of his own mind, Jonesy turns to the comfort of ritual. He paces his office, a psychological stronghold he has built to keep the alien entity, Mr. Grey, at bay. This is a fascinating look into the resilience of the human psyche. Jonesy uses obsessive counting to maintain sanity. But then, a breakthrough occurs. He realizes that because this prison exists within his own imagination, its physical laws are subject to his will. He pushes the boundaries, expanding the room, proving that while Mr. Grey controls the body, Jonesy still rules the soul. In this expanded mental space, he calls out for help. He invokes the memory of Dudits. The response is not a voice, but a symbol, a cribbage board appearing on his desk. It represents the history of their friendship, a game played over decades. It signals that he is not alone. Someone wants to play. We shift to Duddits, the psychic anchor of the group. His physical body is failing, ravaged by leukemia, but his consciousness is operating on a transcendent level. There is a tragic beauty here. The world sees Duddits as intellectually disabled, yet he is the only one capable of navigating the complex telepathic line. He is suffering immense pain, hiding it from Henry to protect him, acting as the silent guardian. Duddits realizes that the cribbage game is more than a pastime. It is a conduit. He projects himself into Jonesy's mental office. He understands that to defeat the alien, they must use a weapon that the alien cannot comprehend. Not a gun, but a raw sensory obsession. In the physical world, the chase is desperate. Henry and Owen speed through the rain, with Duddits deteriorating in the back seat. The connection between the friends is visceral. As Duddits bleeds, Henry feels the psychic weight. It is revealed that Duddits wasn't asleep, but in a deep trance, fighting the spiritual battle alongside Jonesy. Back in the mental stronghold, the game of cribbage becomes a battleground for control. Jonesy realizes that Duddits has been playing them all along, not in a malicious way, but guiding them, always sharper than he appeared. The retarded facade falls away to reveal a powerful telepath, exhausted but lucid. As they peg their points, Duddits reveals the strategy. He asks what Mr. Gray wants. Jonesy thinks of murder, but Duddits knows the alien's weakness is the new, overwhelming sensory input of the human body. The weapon is a specific, greasy, irresistible craving. Bacon. The psychic assault manifests physically. In the back seat of the Humvee, Duddits convulses, projecting the concept of bacon with such intensity that it causes him to hemorrhage. Henry and Owen realize this isn't random delirium. It is a calculated telepathic strike intended to hijack Mr. Gray's priorities. We now see the effectiveness of this attack from the enemy's perspective. Mr. Gray, the alien entity, is facing an unexpected crisis. He is catching humanity. The text brilliantly inverts the infection trope. Instead of a human catching a virus, the alien is catching emotions, sensory desires, and the chaotic nature of the human mind. He views these feelings as a degradation, a descent into madness. The telepathic injection of bacon hits Mr. Gray like a physical blow. His alien logic, which dictates a swift mission to the reservoir to spread the infection, clashes with the primal biological roar of Jonesy's stomach. The irony is palpable. An advanced extraterrestrial intelligence is being derailed by the gluttonous demands of the body it stole. The craving for a bacon sandwich becomes an overriding command, forcing the alien to submit to human weakness. Henry, attuned to the telepathic frequency, feels the shift. The headache he suffers is the echo of Mr. Gray's hunger. He realizes the plan is working. Mr. Gray is pulling over. The indestructible alien force has been waylaid by an appetite. Meanwhile, the pursuit team of Darkness, Kurtz, Freddy, and the infected Perlmutter closes in. Kurtz is a study in madness, a man whose pride has stripped him of everything but the desire to destroy. Perlmutter, now a host for the virus, acts as a grotesque radar, reading the minds of the quarry. He confirms that Duddits and Jonesy have successfully weaponized hunger. Kurtz, realizing the race is tight, orders his driver to push their Humvee to the breaking point. It is a race between three forces: the desperate heroes, the corrupted military, and the confused alien. The scene at Deke McCaskill's store is a masterclass in tension and the uncanny. Mr. Gray enters, a patchwork of ticking movements and alien stillness, wearing a bright orange hunting coat. To Deke, the shopkeeper, the terror is immediate. This is not a normal robbery. The entity speaks with voices in Deke's head, demonstrating the sheer violation of telepathy. Mr. Gray's control is absolute and cruel. He forces Deke to pick his own nose until cartilage tears, a petty display of dominance. But the true horror is the feast. Mr. Gray buys bacon, bread, and mayonnaise. He does not cook the meat. He constructs sandwiches of raw, cured pork, and consumes them with orgasmic ecstasy. The description of the alien finding divine pleasure in the raw, cold fat highlights the total disconnect between the pilot and the vehicle. He is overwhelmed by the sensory explosion of taste, momentarily incapacitated by the drug of human food. Deke awakens to a silent store, the monster gone. The aftermath is grim, vomit and half-eaten raw meat scattered outside, scavenged by crows. The scene serves as a forensic evidence of the alien's unnatural biology, rejecting the gorge. When Kurtz's Humvee arrives, Deke is too traumatized to engage, hiding in the shadows. He is left broken, staring at the money the alien left, currency that is already growing the fuzzy red mold of the alien fungus. The corruption spreads with every touch. The heroes are running out of time. Duddits is fading rapidly, his body unable to sustain the psychic output. Owen, driving the Humvee, attempts to communicate with the dying man. In a flash of telepathic insight, Owen is shown a vision of a safe place, a memory palace, of a cabin with a fireplace. Hanging in this vision is a Dreamcatcher. It is the central metaphor of the story. Owen realizes the truth. Duddits is the Dreamcatcher. He has spent his life filtering the nightmares for his friends, holding the group together and catching the evil before it could consume them. Duddits confirms this with a smile, acknowledging his role as their metaphysical shield. They reach the perimeter of the Quabbin reservoir. The signs warn no fishing, a grim irony given that Mr. Gray intends to pollute the water for millions. Henry knows they are close. He senses that Mr. Gray's gluttony has weakened him, causing severe gastrointestinal distress that might slow him down further. However, the threat of Kurtz looms just miles behind them. As they speed toward the final confrontation, the question remains: can they stop the contamination in time? And if they do, will they survive the collision of these opposing forces? The chase enters its final, desperate leg. Chapter 21. The pursuit narrows, converging on the throat of the water supply, a claustrophobic race against biological annihilation. Mr. Gray, wearing Gary Jones's body like an ill-fitting suit, drives the stolen Subaru up East Street until the physical world finally rebels. The car smashes into a washout, a violent halt that throws the alien consciousness against the fragility of human flesh. Jonesy, trapped within his own mind, vomits, a visceral reaction to the sensory overload of the crash. Here we see the limitations of the invader. Mr. Gray possesses superior knowledge, but lacks the intuitive handling of the host body, nearly losing control to the dormant Jonesy during the shock. The host body is failing. Jonesy's hip is broken, his muscles atrophied, yet Mr. Gray forces the vessel onward. The alien entity must now transport the sleeping dog, the incubator for the Byram, on foot. In a moment of grotesque irony, Mr. Gray accesses Jonesy's memory of Sunday school. He finds an image of Jesus carrying a lamb. With cold, utilitarian logic, the alien mimics this posture of mercy to transport an instrument of mass death. He drapes the comatose, pulsating dog over his shoulders and begins the agonizing trudge towards Shaft 12. Meanwhile, the relentless machinery of the military pursuit grinds closer. Kurtz and Freddy, riding in the Humvee, are the embodiment of obsession. In the back seat, Archie Perlmutter is no longer a man, but a biological radio receiver, bloated and slipping into a coma. Kurtz, detaching further from sanity, decides Perlmutter is expendable. The mission has devolved from containment to a personal vendetta against Owen Underhill. Kurtz envisions himself and Freddy as Quantrill's raiders, romanticizing their brutality as they close in on the quarry. Ahead of them, Henry, Owen, and the dying Duddits reach the Quabbin reservoir gates. The atmosphere is heavy with the ghosts of the past. The landscape mimics the deep-cut road of their childhood. Duddits is fading rapidly, his leukemia accelerated by the psychic strain, but his mind remains the anchor. He establishes a link with Henry, pulling him out of the Humvee and into a memory construct, a payphone at Gosselin's store. This isn't just nostalgia, it is a desperate tactical maneuver. Duddits reveals the terrifying truth. Physical force cannot stop the alien. Only Jonesy can do it. The narrative fractures here, splitting between physical desperation and metaphysical realization. Inside the mind of Gary Jones, the sanctuary is collapsing. The mental office, once a fortress of solitude, is disintegrating in a direct parallel to the fall of the House of Usher. The alien's dominance has rotted the host's psyche from the inside out. Wood panels peel like dead skin. The floor shakes with the tremors of the body's physical exhaustion. But amidst the ruin, a phone rings. It is the childhood phone, the direct line to the past. Henry's voice comes through the receiver, bridging the gap between minds. He delivers the revelation that recontextualizes their entire reality. They are not just friends connected by telepathy, they are existing inside the Dreamcatcher. Dudits is the center, the hub holding the strands together. The geography of their connection is literal. Jonesy realizes he must stop hiding and run along the psychic strands toward the center to meet Henry. The metaphor of the Dreamcatcher becomes the battlefield. In the physical world, Mr. Gray reaches the shaft house. It is a bleak stone structure jutting into the frozen void of the reservoir. Pain is absolute now, Jonesy's hip screaming with every step, but the alien suppresses it with terrifying will. He breaks a window, dragging the host body and the parasitic cargo inside. He finds the cover to the shaft, the direct line to the aqueduct, the intestine that feeds Boston. He pries it open. The mechanics of genocide are simple. Drop the dog, drown the host, infect the water. Owen Underhill, trailing behind, makes a decision that defines the morality of the moment. He sees Henry and Duddits locked in a trance in the back of the stopped Humvee. They look dead, united in their psychic labor. Owen knows Kurtz is minutes away. To save them, he must make them appear already lost. He fires his weapon into the vehicle's windows, shattering the glass and showering his friends in debris. It is a grim camouflage, staging a scene of death to satisfy Kurtz's bloodlust, hoping the madman will bypass the corpses to chase the active threat. Leaving his friends to their silent battle in the dreamscape, Owen takes his rifle and heads into the snow toward Shaft 12 alone. The stage is set on 3 planes of existence: the physical fight at the shaft, the psychological race within the collapsing mind palace, and the tactical deception on the snowy road. The Dreamcatcher is spinning and the strands are tightening. The alien entity known as Mr. Gray is experiencing a sensation entirely foreign to its species: panic. Having traversed the vast emptiness of space, he now finds himself thwarted by the mundane limitations of human biology. Jonesy's muscles are atrophied and weak, and the iron cover of the aqueduct shaft is immovable. Desperation forces Mr. Gray to leverage a crowbar with such violence that he snaps the host body's hip, sacrificing Jonesy's physical integrity for a mere inch of movement. Meanwhile, the border collie lad is in the final grotesque stages of birthing a Byram. The creature inside the dog is swollen to the bursting point, a ticking biological time bomb. Here we see the fragility of the invader. Despite its advanced origins, it is reduced to frantic manual labor, sweating and cursing in the snow, terrified of failure at the very threshold of victory. Inside the metaphysical construct of Jonesy's mind, the Hall of Memories, the landscape is disintegrating. The warehouse is shaking apart, representing the physical trauma occurring in the real world. Jonesy, navigating his own psyche, realizes the futility of running as a cripple. He stumbles through corridors labeled with memories, from departmental politics to childhood stories. But as pain flares, a revelation strikes him, a psychological epiphany that changes the battlefield. The pain runs backward, rewinding time. He looks down to see he is wearing his childhood hunting jacket. He realizes he is immune. The entity, Mr. Gray, is not a physical parasite in his brain, but a ghost in the machine, a construct existing only within the Dreamcatcher. Jonesy sheds his adult limitations, becoming the agile 14-year-old version of himself, sprinting without pain toward the center of his mind to join forces with the memory of Henry. Back in the freezing reality of the storm, the military pursuit closes in. Kurtz and his subordinate Freddie track the Humvee through the snow. Kurtz, a man consumed by his own chaotic madness, relishes the hunt. There is a palpable tension between the commander and his underling. Freddie senses that Kurtz's insanity has crossed a lethal line. The hunter is becoming as dangerous as the prey, highlighting the novel's recurring theme that human malevolence often eclipses supernatural threats. In the mental hospital room, the two boys, Jonesy and Henry, confront the avatar of Mr. Gray. The alien is pathetic here, a grey, featureless thing lying in a hospital bed. This image is significant. The alien appears exactly as pop culture imagines it, because it is formed from Jonesy's subconscious expectations. It is a creature of the Dreamcatcher, woven from human imagination. Jonesy and Henry, united by Dudits' psychic tether, prepare to smother the entity. It is an act of euthanasia for a monster, a quiet assassination within the subconscious. In the shaft house, Mr. Gray struggles to force the dying dog into the gap in the floor. The weasel thing is tearing its way out of the canine, and Mr. Gray needs it to drop into the water supply to infect the populace. But the body is stuck. Suddenly, Mr. Gray is paralyzed. He cannot breathe. The battle in the mind has bled into reality. As Henry and Jonesy suffocate the avatar in the dreamscape, the physical body of Jonesy begins to rebel against the invader. The scene in the mind is one of desperate intimacy. Henry holds the pillow over the alien's face. The creature thrashes, driven by the universal biological imperative to survive. Jonesy realizes that even this projection, this ghost, fears death. It is a profound moment of empathy from the executioners. They recognize the life force in the monster, even as they extinguish it. Reality and hallucination blur. Mr. Gray, choking in the real world, uses the last of his stolen strength to pound on the dog's chest, trying to force the birth of the parasite. He is screaming internally, a mind trapped in a dying vessel, raging against the stubbornness of human resistance. Kurtz and Freddie reach the decoy Humvee. They find the bodies of the two other friends dead in the back seat. Kurtz, ever the pragmatist of death, nearly puts bullets in their heads to be sure, but decides to move on. He is hunting Owen Underhill. Kurtz's dialogue reveals his complete detachment from morality. He views this slaughter as a game, a final test of his tactical genius before the end. In the mental hospital, Jonesy grabs the remote control, a symbol of control over the broadcast of his life, and smashes it. He realizes that Mr. Gray was never a mighty conqueror, but a sick, desperate traveler. The invasion was, in essence, intergalactic schizophrenia. With Henry's encouragement, Jonesy prepares to deliver the final blow, reclaiming the agency he lost days ago. The psychic feedback loop closes. As Jonesy slashes the throat of the alien avatar in his mind, Mr. Gray feels his own throat tearing in the physical world. The invader is overcome with shock. The superior species is being undone by the sheer will of the inferior host. The consciousness of Mr. Gray disintegrates, leaving only a final thought of regret before fading into oblivion. With the parasite's mind destroyed, its physical residue, a cloud of red dust and a condom-like husk, manifests and withers. But victory comes at a terrible price. Jonesy snaps back into his own body, and the pain of his broken hip and shattered physiology crashes down on him instantly. He looks through the floor, his vision briefly transcending space, and sees the Byram, the shit weasel finally birthing from the dog. It is a creature of pure instinct, blind and bloody, dragging itself toward the water. Jonesy and Henry share a fleeting psychic farewell before the connection is severed by Duddits' impending death. Jonesy is alone. The telepathy is gone. He's just a broken man on a concrete floor. He lunges for the weasel, grabbing the slimy, toothy nightmare with his bare hands. It bites him, tearing his coat, and he flings it aside. He screams at the window, where Owen Underhill has just appeared. Jonesy is helpless, his body ruined, pleading for the soldier to do what he cannot, kill the infection before it reaches the water. Owen freezes. Confronted by the impossible reality of the alien larvae, his military training fails him. The absurdity and horror of the situation induce a paralysis. He watches the creature crawl toward the shaft, unable to lift his weapon. It is the human flaw of hesitation, the inability to process the unnatural, that nearly dooms the world. In the Humvee, Henry is with Dudits. The dream is over, reality is cold and full of glass. Dudits is dying, but in his final moments, his psychic power flares one last time. He sees Henry, really sees him, and through that connection, he reaches out to the only weapon available, Owen Underhill. Duddits, the innocent, the Dreamcatcher who held the circle of friends together, initiates a final act of possession. Kurtz hears the gunshots ahead. He signals Freddy to wait. He knows the end is near, and he intends to meet it alone. He sends Freddy away, or so he thinks, planning to ambush Owen. Kurtz is stepping off the path of sanity entirely, preparing for a final duel that is as much about ego as it is about duty. Owen Underhill is not moving his own hands. In his mind, he hears the nonsensical childhood catchphrases of Duddits, Scooby-Doo. The dying alien-human hybrid is piloting Owen's body. The rifle comes up, steady and sure. Owen fires, killing the weasel just inches from the water. With the threat neutralized, Owen shares a brief, grim exchange with Jonesy. They are two soldiers at the end of the world, but the victory is short-lived. As Owen leaves the shaft house, his luck runs out. Kurtz ambushes him. The older officer kills Owen, mocking him with a paper hat, a symbol of the absurdity of their mission. But the cycle of violence is instantaneous. Freddie Johnson emerges and executes Kurtz. The hierarchy of command dissolves into a circular firing squad. Henry, hearing the chaotic firefight, realizes he is the last survivor of his group. He plays dead in the Humvee as footprints crunch in the snow past him. He is terrified, armed only with the knowledge that his friends are gone. The footsteps pass. The killer has missed him. Freddie Johnson attempts to escape in the Humvee, dreaming of fading into the anonymity of the American West. But he has forgotten the passenger. The corpse of Perlmutter is no longer just a corpse. It is a cocoon. From the dead man's body, another weasel bursts forth. In a horrifyingly claustrophobic sequence, the creature attacks Freddie from the back seat. The predator becomes the prey within the steel cage of the military vehicle. Freddie is torn apart, his escape route becoming his tomb. Henry watches the carnage from the other vehicle. He sees the Humvee rocking, the blood splashing the windshield. He realizes the cold is killing the alien, but not fast enough. Henry, channeling the bravado of his fallen friends, decides to finish it. He stumbles through the snow, laughing manically, a defense mechanism against the sheer horror of his reality. He finds a weapon. The weasel stares at him from the bloody interior of the car. Henry fires into the gas tank. The explosion is a cleansing fire, incinerating the last of the infection and the last of the military pursuers. Henry stands in the snow, a psychiatrist turned soldier, waiting until the flames consume everything. Henry returns to the shaft house. He finds Jonesy alive, barely tethered to consciousness by pain. The reunion is quiet. The telepathy is gone. They are forced to speak with clumsy words again. They joke about the mundane, grocery lists and hot dogs, masking the trauma of their survival. It is a return to the normalcy they fought to protect. The alien threat is gone. buried in the water and the fire, leaving two friends alone in the silence of the snow. The Dreamcatcher is broken, but the bond remains. Epilogue. The narrative settles on Labor Day, the season of endings. Henry Devlin sits on a porch near the Quabbin Reservoir, missing fingers on the hand holding his beer, frostbitten souvenirs from a winter hell. He is with Jonesy, who now moves with a Teflon hip, a man mechanically rebuilt after an alien consciousness wore him like a cheap suit. They survived the military quarantine, a sterile underground nightmare of Dr. Strangelove proportions, but the psychological scarring is distinct. Henry still suffers from the haunting visitation of the dead in his sleep. Jonesy, however, is healing, the memory of Mr. Grey, that parasitic alien hitchhiker, fading into the consistency of a bad dream. It highlights a terrifying human resilience, how quickly the mind scrubs away violation just to survive the daylight. Watching Jonesy's toddler play, a symbol of life persisting, they dissect the trauma. Henry argues that Duddits, their late friend with Down syndrome, was the anchor. He was the Dreamcatcher that held their fractured lives together against the void. Here, the lore touches on cosmic horror. The idea that the alien invasion wasn't a grand destiny, but a biological accident. A simple infection caught by a species too open to the universe. Henry offers a chilling diagnosis regarding the possession. He theorizes that the alien didn't just steal Jonesy's body. It hijacked his darkest urges. The creature utilized Jonesy's innate human fascination with violence, his subconscious love for horror films, as a primitive survival tool. It suggests a Jungian shadow. We carry the capacity for monsters within us, waiting for a trigger. Ultimately, they conclude that humanity itself is a massive dreamcatcher, snagging nightmares and miracles alike. As Henry holds Jonesy's child, they share a brief telepathic spark. The line remains active. They walk into the sunlight, leaving the darkness as merely a shadow trailing behind them. It is vital to note that King wrote this conclusion by hand while recovering from his own near-fatal van accident. The physical agony of the characters mirrors the author's real-life shattered bones, infusing the text with a visceral reality. It serves as a final testament that fiction is the ultimate escape from the prison of physical pain. Thank you for watching and sweet dreams. Please subscribe to Horror Tales for more deep dives into the lore of Stephen King novels.